Ah, what's going on, brothers? What's going on, man? Yo, we here for a future classic live stream. It's Japan. Y'all love Japan. Y'all love the woman there. Y'all love the culture. Y'all love the country. Let's get it. Let's get it, bruv. So, brothers, first and foremost, is my audio clear? Press one in the live stream chat. Is my audio clean, crisp, and concise? Karen, how's my audio, bro?
Sounds crispy.
Awesome, brother. Awesome. Brothers in the live stream chat, can you press on one on the YouTube stream? If you're watching on Twitter, on Kick, whatever, let me know right now if my audio is clean, crisp, and concise. My guests can hear me correctly, but again, it's all about y'all, the audience. So please let me know if my audio is good. Mayday, check 1, 2. The Bridge, appreciate you both for letting me know my audio is cool. Can I get a couple more ones, please? Who's here? We got 8 people watching so far. Stacks is clear. Thank you, Stacks. Awesome. So let's get straight into it, brothers, okay? So first and foremost, thank you very much for the support over the past several years. Your support is greatly appreciated. I welcome aboard the new people. I accept and I embrace you with open arms. When you come on the stream tonight, okay, please hit the like button, hit the super chats, hit the PayPal donations, cop the merch, book your IT consultations with me in regards to IT guidance. That's in the kindly link below. And of course, as you can see on the screen, Python course coming July 2024. Stay tuned for more info. I'll be taking in new people to teach Python, where I'll teach you myself directly in July 2024. Stay tuned for that. IT Python will change your life. We're definitely going to break it down in today's stream. So let's get straight into it, okay? As you can see in the title of this live stream, Toronto is the Matrix. I had to leave. Passport bros on life and working IT in Japan. Okay. I've got a very special guest here today called Mr. Kyron. Kyron, how you doing, bro? You good?
Great. How about you?
I'm doing fantastic, bro. I'm doing fantastic, brother. It's a cold, even though it's June over here in the UK, it's a cold afternoon, bro. I don't get it. It's summertime and it's cold. how's weather over there in Japan, bro?
Oh man, it's perfect. It's never too cold. Summertime can get pretty hot if you're not used to, like, I would say honestly, like pushing 40 degrees Celsius. It might catch you. But there's different parts of Japan. Where I am is pretty mild. I'm up in the mountains.
Wow, amazing, brother. Living the life out there, ain't you, bro?
Oh man, it's great out here, especially compared to where you are in England. I don't know how you do it.
So we'll be out there soon. We'll be out of this country very soon, brother. Don't worry, don't watch that, bro. So, Mr. Kyron, I want to say thank you, brother, for your time, which is greatly appreciated. So, give us a brief background as to who you are, where you're from, and anything special about you, bro, interesting about you.
Cool. So first off, my name is Kyron. I'm originally from Toronto, Canada, sadly. Spent 25 years too long in Canada. The country's gone through a lot of changes that are not positive, and I'm sure some of you have seen in the news or heard from different people, but not a great place to live socially, economically. Eventually, I kind of came to my senses. This would have been, I guess, back in 2018. I took a trip to Japan, and that was a life-changing experience. And then from there, I went to Dubai for a couple of months, worked in Dubai. And I've lived in a few places since then. I've lived in the UK, I've lived in the Philippines, and now I live permanently in Japan.
Wow, amazing, brother. So, brother, I want to know more about your life in Toronto, right? Sure. I've been hearing a lot of stories in the past several years that Toronto really is a matrix. So,
yeah,
brother, let me know. So, so how about we list all the things wrong with Toronto in 2024? So, I think the first thing, brother. So, how about the condition of Black men, the living standards of Black men, the lack of wealth that Black men have in Toronto?
Yeah,
Black men having no power there in Toronto. Do you want to speak more about that, brother? You're from there, you live there. Break it down for us, please.
Yeah. So, like, the first thing I would say that's just really disturbing is that I found other parts of the world, people, when they look at Black men, for the most part, like, there's always going to be people who are racist that will write you off, right? But for the most part, there are places that I've gone to where people are looking at, like, they'll evaluate you as an individual, right? And the way they evaluate you even if it's still prejudiced to some level, there's still some level of reasonability to it, right? So an example would be like, no one's going to look at me or you like we're King Von, right?
Mm.
Canada's a little bit weird for a ton of reasons. So the first thing I would say as a black man is that what makes Canada unique is when I lived in England, the people at the bottom of the totem pole, especially outside of London, it was really poor white people, right? It was poor white people who were like economically disenfranchised, maybe substance abuse. And then in London, it'd be like Polish people and Albanians, right? So black people aren't at the very bottom. In Canada, we're at the very bottom because unfortunately, there's not much natives left, right? And everybody's on top of us. There's, huge communities of Indians, huge community of Chinese, huge community of Middle Eastern people where wealth is accumulated, right? And then in America, by contrast, yes, there's tons of black poverty, but there are places like Buckhead or Atlanta. There are places, even Compton's getting kind of expensive, right? Like there's pools of black wealth, and just north of Compton is Ladera Heights. There's not a single wealthy black neighborhood in Canada. So there isn't kind of two sides to it. We're kind of just looked at almost like basically like a charity case at best, and otherwise looked upon with a lot of hate from the different communities. And then you throw in this culture where, like, if I were to compare my life in the UK to Canada, similar demographics, right? But in the UK, I think a lot of minorities, because they're so close to Africa and Asia physically, they're more in line with their culture still. And in Canada, that's not the case. It's way further away. So all the ethnic minorities tend to default to being white, and they feel like they're white, and then they look down on the black people. And it's literally, of all the 14, 15 countries I've been to, that's the only country that's like that.
Wow, that's crazy, brother. So,
Yeah.
but you're telling me that black men get no respect in Toronto. Black men are at the bottom, very bottom in Toronto in terms of wealth, respect, opportunity, getting jobs. But essentially, black men are an oppressed class in Toronto. Is that what you're telling me, bro?
I could give you two anecdotes of how bad it is. So the last time I went home, and it's funny, I just came from, I came back from Dubai. I got in a job, architect job in Emirates. So I came back to Toronto, pick up my stuff, spend some time with family. And I never dress in a way that would be seen as like ghetto or whatever, or straight. Like it's just, I don't have the build for it, you know? So, and I used to work, when I lived in Toronto, I used to work a lot of contract jobs or in finance, right? So I would dress pretty cleanly, completely inoffensive. And literally, I remember I hopped on a train to go downtown, and I sat down. I had my AirPods in. I was just listening to, I believe it was like a Joe Budden podcast or something. Completely chilled out. Sat down on the train. White woman in her like mid-20s sighed really loudly, grabbed her purse, got up, and stormed away.
Wow.
Yeah.
What?
People always like, there's this thing that you'll hear people complain about in Japan is like, oh, well, Japanese people don't like sitting beside foreigners on the train. It's like, try Canada. Another time when I was downtown, I remember I went to go, basically, like a lot of the tech startups are in downtown Toronto. So that's where you would go to meet like the startup community, investors, you name it. I would spend a decent amount of time in the downtown core. I remember going to a coffee shop just before I went to go meet with a tech investor. And I sat down at a spot, and again, like, a white woman got up and walked away. There was this thing that I noticed of like, my cousin does very well for himself, and he moved to Paris, and I moved to Manchester around the same time. And like, people are really weird and defensive and afraid of us. Like, getting into elevators, it'll be like a mixed race couple. It'll be one race of person with the white person. The white woman's tucking her purse under her arm. It's just all sorts of weird stuff that I don't experience even in America, right? Like in America, it's racist, but they can look at you and be like, you're a nerdy black guy, you're not a threat. In Canada, there's no nuance. So not the greatest.
Wow. Okay. So that's the experience of black men in Toronto, Canada, which is shocking. Wow. Um,
Yeah.
From what I remember for several years, I heard that, black men are loved in Toronto. They got the style, everyone copies them. Is that false, brother?
It's 100% false. So the first thing I would say is like, and this became pretty controversial when the Raptors first won the NBA championship. It's something I complained about to a journalist before, and they finally covered. Basically, what happens is in the summertime, the nice neighborhoods will take down their basketball nets, and I'm sure you can realize that's to keep the black people out of the neighborhood, right? Because there will be, I guess you call it football in Europe, but there'll be soccer, there'll be everything else there, but the basketball nets are coming down. right? And even the basketball court I used to play at, it was like in a completely different neighborhood. Nothing bad had ever happened, and they would chain it off in the summertime. So we're kind of looked at like just outright animals, right? Um, and then there was another thing that I'd love to bring up, which is I know there's this idea that, oh, we're looked at and revered or whatever. I think for American guys who come to Toronto during Carabana, OVO Fest, like festival season when the city's really kind of, like happy and it's good weather, you might have a good experience. But it's very different if you're like working there, living there. There's no kind of, especially if you're born there's no like exoticism to you, right? You're not this American guy coming in. You're gonna get treated pretty differently. And yeah, I would say like there was one time there's a funny clip where essentially J. Cole and Michael B. Jordan got denied into a club in Toronto, and people on the street were screaming "Free J. Cole." Um, you know, so if you think that you're gonna be like treated like a celebrity there, those are two A-list celebrities getting denied entry into a club. So what do you think's gonna happen to you? Just throwing it out
there. Oh, facts, bro. Absolute facts. So now, next question for you, brother. Okay.
Sure.
It is now in terms of Chinese and Indians in Toronto,
yeah.
right? How do they move out there, and how do they treat black men? The reason why I'm focusing on Chinese and Indians because, from what I've heard, they hold a lot of power in Toronto. They essentially,
oh my God, power.
Yeah, break it down for us, bro.
Sure. The power structure in Toronto, it's funny. Like I would say that because people always talk about white people, but you have to be specific in Toronto, right? The Italians have a ton of power, so they control a whole suburb. I'm sure you can ascertain there's a lot of organized crime, right? But they control a lot of politics as well, a lot of construction. That money fuels politics and other stuff. So the Italians are very powerful in Toronto. They move pretty quietly for the most part, but they control a lot. Then you have the Chinese. So let's say you were go to a nice part of Toronto right now and you're trying to rent a condo. 90% chance it's owned by a Chinese investor, right? It could be somebody who's from like Hong Kong, mainland China, whether they're living in Canada or not. They control so much of the real estate market in Toronto and Vancouver. It's you wouldn't even believe it. I used to live in a really nice neighborhood, and anytime I would go outside, like the worst car on the street would be a Maserati. That would be the worst. It would be filthy rich, young Chinese people driving Lamborghinis. I've seen tons of McLarens. And through kind of what's happened is in America, there's a lot of scrutiny moving to America, right? You can't just get a visa and pop up. It doesn't work like that. And then in the UK, you guys have played with your immigration rules quite a bit since Brexit and even before that. Canada is like the Wild West, where literally if you were to just come in on a student visa, so you'd like enroll in a college there, enroll in a university, you could bring anybody in pretty easily, right? And the crazy thing that was happening was that China cracked down on a lot of the illegal activity and the illegal money within the mainland. What people were doing was literally enrolling, like they'll have either themselves or one of their children enroll in a college in Canada, and they would come with millions of dollars of cash. I'm talking like in the news, there were international students buying $2 million houses in cash on a student visa. So all of that kind of like, some of it is hard-earned money, right? But a lot of it is illicit money is being laundered into Toronto. So you already have to compete with generational wealth that owns everything with the Italians. Then you have these foreign landlords and these foreign owners. You walk the street, everybody in nice neighborhoods has a Lamborghini and these expensive things, and you have to compete with them for rentals. That's bad. And I wouldn't say they're outright prejudiced, so to speak. Like, the one thing I will say about the Chinese community is that, like, if you have the money and you kind of come to where you're supposed to be and you want to rent, it's usually not a problem, right? The Indian community is a little bit different. So they're very well established in Canada. They've done well for themselves, even into politics now. And it's tough, right? Because just like with Chinese people, there's not just one type of Indian. You have different types from different parts of India. And then you also have to consider there are ones that grew up in Canada for 20, 30 plus years. And then there are ones that are fresh from India. And they come in massive numbers. They dwarf even the amount of Chinese students that come. And the ones that are fresh from India stick together, right? They're in a new country. Maybe they're a little bit intimidated. Some of them can be a bit prejudiced. Some of them are fine, but they don't really interact with everybody else. And then the ones born in Canada, it's a bit of a mess, right? Like just the way they interact with Black culture a lot of times. Not all of them are racist, I wouldn't say that, but when you have to go and rent from people who are kind of Indians that have lived in Canada a long time, a lot of them have their prejudices. And for people who are in the know of kind of what happens in Toronto, a lot of crime in the suburbs are done by Indians. But the city as a whole, people don't look at it like, oh, it's everybody committing crime. They look at it like, oh, the Black people commit it. So there's lots of this kind of like the Indians somewhat act with impunity where there's not like a cultural backlash. And still, when you go to rent, it's like hoopla. I mean, I had a situation where I was working for an AI startup. This is really early. This is like 2013. And literally I got refused. It's funny. It was in a nice neighborhood. It's like a 1-bedroom condo. I went to go do a viewing. The place smelled like pot. I was like, whatever. I just needed to get it, literally get out the hood and rent somewhere nice. And they made an offhand comment. I kind of looked past it. And when it was time to go and sign the lease, essentially the owner denied me, and he gave a bunch of stupid reasons, and he wouldn't even run my credit yet. And I told him, okay, just go and do it, and I can give you references, and he refused to do it. And he was like a young 20, 30 something Indian person. So there's definitely heck, when I last went back to Canada, I got harassed by customs, a whole bunch of like silly questions, and it was an Indian person. So, we're kind of, because of the Italians having the wealth and the control of a lot of stuff in the city, that our mayor used to be in construction, right? So construction drives a lot of stuff in Toronto that's done by the Italians. Then a lot of the expensive properties are bought by Chinese investors, and rents are driven by international students that are Chinese and Indian. The Indians control businesses. You go to work, 90% of your coworkers might be Indian, 5% will be white, and then 5% will be other. You try getting a job against the other Indian people, right? So it's very, very, very difficult out of all the countries I've been to for a Black person to compete, because we don't have that sense of community. And then to top it off, the Caribbean people are in kind of one set. Then you have the African people who are in one set. And then you have to divide by like who grew up in Canada and who's fresh off the boat. Super difficult. And again, like I said, I've lived in England. I've spent a lot of time in the US, spent a lot of time in Asia. It's the only place in the world I've been to that's like that.
That's insane, brother. But can we also talk about gatekeeping of jobs by Indians and Chinese against Black people? So, for example, right, like I can confirm this, right? If you go for a job, right, and manager is Indian, or is the job role as a lot of Indian people working in the company, you definitely, more than likely, as a Black man, are not getting a job, even though you were the best performing interviewee out of everyone across all races. You were by far the best. You got an Indian manager, you got a Chinese manager. They see you're Black. They'll ask you hard questions. They know you're good, and they'll just lie that he wasn't good and hire a Chinese or Indian person. Break it down for us, bro.
Sure. So I've been quite blessed that I have really good technical skills. I've worked for some of the biggest companies on the planet. Microsoft, Emirates. A big law firm, you name it. But even in that, and again, these are not things that I've had happen. I've interviewed so many places, Singapore, the UK, Dubai, like only in Canada, and once in the US, where you'll do an interview and you'll just get some feedback that does not match what happened, right? And you'll do the interview, that the job's a fit, whatever, how you performed. And then the recruiter will go in with you to the interview with like a certain level of confidence, and then the feedback is totally out of whack. That's how it's some nonsense that's happening. And it's interesting because I know we're talking about like Black people, right? But what I've seen of late is it's to the point where white people are even complaining, right? It will be, first off, like let's be real here. People want to pay low salaries, so they'll hire the person who's fresh from India that has some kids that needs a job no matter what. That will take, a $40,000 Canadian job, which is like 27K USD. That's skilled tech work, and they'll hire the international students who will take whatever pay they can and abuse them. So the first thing is just like people are trying to undercut. I've seen a lot of white Canadians of late complain about this. And it even goes deep into like rentals, where you'll see a rental listing and it will say Hindi speakers only, or like only vegetarians, right? So the discrimination, a lot of it does come from just like trying to save money. Then there is some places I've been to where, there are British values, right? There are American values and there are Canadian values. But when you have a huge immigrant group come in and import their values that don't, they don't kind of line up with how your country works, it creates problems. So an example would be, when I went to Silicon Valley, and I mean, like, I was at NASA, I was at some major venture capital firms, I was at Google, I was at Microsoft. The fact that I don't have a degree or diploma, they championed that. They were like, no, you don't need to go to post-secondary. Focus on your career. You're really good at tech. That's all good, right? And when I dealt with startup investors in Toronto, it was the exact same thing. When you go to the job market and you deal with people who are fresh from India and China, and they all value education because that's what they know in their head, they're looking at you like you're trash because you don't have a degree, right? I would honestly say that a lot of times when I interviewed with white Canadians, that was not the case. Most of the time, if anything. So it's not necessarily just like there's always going to be discrimination, but you also have to understand they have a very different value system that's incompatible with how the West works. But there's so much of them in one country or one city, so that you're kind of going to face that. Then the other thing is, like you mentioned, there is a preference for most people to hire their own people, right? And there isn't these established companies that are ran by Africans or Caribbean people. So we're kind of left as almost like beggars on the sideline. There are companies where you work in the suburbs of Toronto, it's going to be all white people or mostly Italians. You work in the city, it might be mostly Indian or mostly Chinese. Those exist, so they have those pockets for themselves. We don't have that. There'd been points where I'd worked at some companies and it was older white dudes defending me from Indian and not really Chinese, but more so kind of like Indian people being a little bit discriminatory. But I will also say there are good Indian people in the city because not everybody's like that. I did have people bring me to the startup community and do certain stuff for me that was very helpful in my career. So it's not always going to be negative, and sometimes there's going to be a lot of benefits to that diversity because they could teach you things and vice versa. But if you're going to live in a city like that, you do have to be, number one, aware that you're dealing with not only your cultural values, you're dealing with Canada's cultural values, and then the people around you. My friend at work recently got told, you're going to have to learn Hindi because there's so much Hindi speakers here. And
What?
He doesn't work in a career that's like teaching or anything, and he was complaining that people were speaking their language, and they told him, you need to learn some of our language. Canada already has two languages, English and French, right? So, stuff like that can get a little bit contentious. But there are benefits. You do get sometimes to intermingle with different cultures. Like I said, there have been Indian people who have really took me by the wayside and brought me to different places and integrated me into certain communities of tech. But I think in general in the city, it's the most racially divided place I've been. It's really weird.
Wow, brother, what kind of discriminatory actions did Indians do towards you in the workplace, brother? Apart from not obviously hiring you because you're black, but when working with them.
So I'll say the company's name because I don't care. I was working for Bank of Montreal, and there's a technology platform from VMware that I'm certified in. So first off, it's super niche. I remember I did a LinkedIn search, and there was only 6 jobs for it. So really, really niche. I got the 1,000 hours certified, all the stuff. And I'm probably the only person in Canada with the skill set for it. You have to keep in mind, Canada's a very small market. There's more people in California, right? So I get to BMO. I'm hired as a specialist. The recruitment agency, totally fine. It's the main director of the agency is a young black man, which is really impressive. And I get placed at the company. And all the people there are kind of middle-aged. It's a mix, white, some black people, some Indian, some Chinese. And I got hired at a senior level. And at the same time, they hire a junior consultant. A lot less experience, but to help as well. So the first thing is I don't even get a desk. I have to sit beside my colleagues, and it's to the point where at their desk, where it's the point where people I'm interacting with, I'm supposed to be this trusted consultant. They think I'm an intern. The Indian guy has a desk. I'm a specialist in mobile devices. I've been to Apple's headquarters. I've talked to their executives, worked at Microsoft, and I didn't get a company phone to use. You can't always use your personal phone. They give you a corporate phone. I didn't get one. He did. The VPN access. So if you're at home, you can jump on and do certain stuff. I didn't get VPN access. He did. I didn't even get a laptop for weeks. He did. And he's junior, and I was senior. Now, a bunch of crap happened. ended up getting sacked from that job. And the funny thing is, I ended up getting hired at TD, and the manager from that job at BMO ended up working underneath me. So, I got my comeuppance in the end, and it was an interesting experience. And I have a good relationship with BMO's HR now, and they did apologize for that. But that's definitely the type of stuff you have to face because, like let's just be honest. You hire some 35, 40-year-old white senior consultant and make him sit at the desk like he's a 22-year-old intern. He's going to flip a chair over, right? And then you have somebody who's supposed to be more junior than him getting stuff before you and treated a certain way. He's going to have a meltdown. But that's also the catch. It's like when you're black in that city, if you get angry, people are going to act like they're afraid, right? They're going to be like, oh my gosh, the angry black man's going to harm us. So you kind of have to like temper certain stuff. It's just not good. Like I said, never faced that anywhere. And I've worked in, heck, it's not like an Indian people thing. I'm not trying to discriminate against Indian people. I've worked in UAE and it was like 99% Indian people and I didn't face any racial discrimination. They were very nice. But there's this thing about Canadian culture where like, because they're in a different culture, a country so far away, they kind of like stick together and help each other out and do all these things. And then there's this element where like, I mentioned they might talk to each other in their language at the workplace. You might get kind of the cold shoulder as treated the outsider. And that definitely happened at 2 banks I worked at that were very much, a lot of Indians worked there. So yeah, I would say racial diversity is a great thing in Canada, but in practice it's not racially diverse if it's, 75% Indian, 20% white, and then everything else is just other. That's not really diverse, is it?
Damn, black people are going through it in Toronto. Jeez. Flipping heck. And obviously we had Toronto, Canada, some sort of multicultural society with values, blah blah blah. That doesn't appear to be the case in Toronto, right? So
Yeah.
but you mentioned how even old white men had to back you up. Do you want to speak about what happened there, where old white dudes had to back you up as well?
Yeah, no, one thing I will say, like, it's kind of sad, but like white Canadians, white people who like grew up there are kind of like traditional Canadian values. In a lot of ways, they're kind of, at least in Toronto, you don't really run into them as much as you think you would, especially if you're not downtown. But they're far from racist, and I guess at least towards us. And I guess the thing is that they hold the perspective of like, no, black people have been in Canada a long time. Like, it's not like we're new and we're a guest. You know what I mean? Like, we've been there. I've literally, and it's not a good thing, but it's just a reality. I've had old white people pull me aside and be like, I remember in the 70s, black people being here. Why is there overnight like a million Indians everywhere? So there is kind of like a contentious, if I remove black people, there is even a contentious nature of how white Canadians view Indians. But you know how it is with white people. They don't have enough kids, right? And they get outnumbered really quickly. So it kind of, culture shifts. So I remember I was working for a really, really high-end firm that is in finance. I was getting paid an ungodly amount of money. It was like $105 an hour, right? I was a specialist consultant. And long story short, I was young, but not so young. And I had, this is when I had like a lot of experience consulting already, right? Early in my career, I'd be like, maybe I didn't know what to do. No, now I was locked in, right? And I was focused on some VMware technology and then also Microsoft 365 and Azure, right? So my bread and butter. And I had more experience doing a lot of these things than most of the people in the company, right? I could do my job and then some. So it was like a team of specialists, like really kind of type A alphas, right? And the manager was exceptional. He was this middle-aged Italian guy, came from Jersey and would travel between Jersey and Toronto. And he, almost like a sports coach, he had to manage the different egos and personalities of the team. And he always had a lot of trust in me because I would do a lot of research, work hard, good quality work. And it was interesting because, the other coworkers in the company would grill me on stuff, right? So I had one coworker grill me on how like, oh, this networking, do I understand this? And, one time the manager had to cut him off and like, no, that's not his job. That's your job. You work in networking. Don't ask your architect who does this other stuff how to do your job to make you feel better, right? That's a very common thing where it's like they'll know something as like a specialist in one area and then they'll kind of try to attack you for not knowing it, but that's not why you're there, right? And then the other thing would just be like maybe giving you orders or treating you kind of in a certain way when you're very senior And it was literally to the point where that, I have a lot of thankfulness for him. He literally like came over to my desk one time and shouted out these two women who are my coworkers. And he said, "No, Kyron's not at your level. Kyron's not an intern. Kyron makes way more money than you, is way more senior. You knock it off." Like, he got annoyed and had to interject. And these are two young women. So if you think about if you think about how racism is portrayed in the world, especially to black men, you would never think it would be an old white dude from America coming to defend the young black dude. But that's how bad it is in Canada. If you talk to even a lot of like British and American liberals, they don't like Canada because the version of liberalism in Canada is super duper weird. I remember talking to one girl about my views on abortion, and I kind of have like almost left-leaning views. I think that, look, I don't like restricting people's bodily rights. I just don't think that it's something that should be encouraged, right? Because we give women right to abortion, but we don't also push them to go and get childcare. Have an option open to them. I have a pretty nuanced POV, and I got called the N-word for my view on abortion with the hard R by a woman who was Indian, right?
So, in work?
No, I was outside of work, but like, these are things that you kind of have to understand. Is like, you were looked at like you're not going to be taken seriously, right? And if you are taken seriously, it's rare. A lot of times people are going to look at you at a charity case. And then because people have these kind of like, let's call a spade, white liberal values, when they have them and they don't think you do, they talk down on you, right? They'll talk down on you for all sorts of things that they associate with black people. And it's just not good. Like, you're looked at a certain way. Anytime I hear about in the news like some violence in Toronto that happens and it involves black people, all the liberalness goes out the window and everybody wants to talk crap about black people, right? And it's just all the blacks. But on the opposite side of Canada in Vancouver, there's no black people and there's just the same amount of stuff happening. And it's Indians doing the crime and nobody says a peep about it, right? So it is this kind of like weird thing where on one hand, everybody tries to act like they're progressive. If I was to say something out of line, with all this diversity, equity, inclusion, and all that stuff, I would get reprimanded at work or fired, right? But I remember I worked at a startup and it was mostly like white and then Asian. So like, some Chinese, Indians, Middle Eastern. And literally the Middle Eastern dudes were nice. They had to pull me aside after work one day and they had to tell me what was happening. I didn't even realize I was being discriminated against. I started this job and during the interviews, they asked me a question. They're like, yeah, just asking me like, are you capable of dealing with different people, different backgrounds? Like, yeah, not a problem. And they specifically asked me about gay people. Canada especially is super, like, I think one of, if not the most pro-gay country on the planet. It's like, yeah, no problem. Like, people are people, whatever. So I enter the question interview. I get the job. And then there's like this weird tension in the workplace between me and a coworker who's gay. I don't know why. I'm like 19 at the time. I'm a kid, right? I'm just happy to work in tech startups. And I didn't understand what's going on. And this person was weird with me. But essentially, I worked super late, and then these Middle Eastern dudes pulled me aside, and I said, "Yo, everyone's just assuming that you're like homophobic, and they're feeling uncomfortable with the fact that you're there and there's a gay person there." I had not said anything about anything, right? They just assume I'm homophobic because I'm black. Mind you, there are literal Middle Eastern people there, and I think we know what Sharia law is like, right? And their values when it comes to gay people, but they assume the black person is homophobic. So it's kind of like, oh, okay. And eventually what happened was there was an opportunity to send us on a sales trip to somewhere in America. And it's known for being pretty racist and just like, super right leaning. And essentially there's like a conversation where me or the gay person, the company didn't feel safe sending because they thought we'd be in danger. And I guess the gay person kind of felt like bonded with me over that and realized I wasn't going to discriminate against them or anything like that. But just off rip of assuming like I'm homophobic just because I'm black, and they're so gung-ho on their liberal values and protecting these people that they're comfortable discriminating against another group of people is a very Canadian fucking thing. It's just bad. So yeah.
Wow. So, brother,
hold
on. Sorry. What's going on here? Great stream so far, brother. Great stream so far. We got a brother out on Twitch. What's going on, bro? What's going on Twitch? Make sure you follow me on my Twitch platform. I'm on Twitch. I'm on Kick. I've got some content coming on there that's only for these platforms. Go and follow me on Twitch and Kick. By the way, your guest is telling the truth. As a black man who works for TD in IT, experience the same discrimination from a certain group of people too. Chew Noir, send me a DM on IG, please. I want to definitely tell your story. About your life in Canada, please send me a DM on IG. Let's touch base, please. And brothers, go and follow me on Twitch and Kick. So, brother, great stream so far.
Thanks.
Now, before we go into Japan, right, I want to speak about Toronto woman. Okay, brother?
Oh my gosh, sure.
So, so brother, you're from Toronto.
Yes,
you've seen it all, right?
Yeah.
I remember this very, very clearly. In 2008, 2009, a guy called Drake came in the scene from Toronto, Canada. And when I met, as I started traveling, and I met people from Canada, brothers from Canada, they would tell me that, yo, Drake has ruined the women in Toronto. Okay. Women that have dealt with him, the dime chicks. He's running through a bunch of chicks out there in Toronto, and the chicks have become gassed up. They don't want average dudes; they want a Drake type dude. Is that true? And break down the Drake effect on women in Toronto.
Sure. So it's really interesting because the first thing I would say, and this might blow you away because I know it's not like that in London, to say the least, but the most beautiful supermodel looking or literal model looking women in Toronto, they're actually really nice. If you ever have a conversation with them, interact with them, super chilled out, right? The problem is, that's the 1% of women, right? Or like less than 1%. And, let's face it, Canada is it's freezing cold like more than half the year. And women who are sought after and have economic resources will go to Spain and vacation, right? So they're not going to be around, and they tend to stay in like ritzy parts of the cities that you might not always be in and certain lifestyle. But when you do run into them, just amazing people. Really nice to say. Everybody else, though, completely different conversation. So, the first thing is like you have to consider, like as a kid, especially a black dude growing up in Toronto, if I compare to my friends who I talk to in America, especially the ones who grew up in the South, a lot of people will date in high school or early in college and get married, but sometime between like high school and college, right? It'll be somebody that they met through either school. Well, just do the math. If a ton of the population is from a demographic that's getting an arranged marriage, right? You're already out bad because mathematically they're not available. Then you have to consider the fact of like a lot of white people in Canada. Like you have to look at it like this, especially for Toronto. White people tend to come into the city when it's time to like maybe go to college or like trying to get their first career job, but they tend to stay out the city until after. So you're kind of missing out on opportunities there. A lot of like East Asian people will tend to live out in the burbs. It's not like London or New York where you can take a train from the suburbs. You can get pretty relatively easily. I suppose you could get from like Birmingham or Kensington to London. That's not the case in Toronto. So the demographics and just the way things are spread is very uneven. And yeah, it creates a lot of problems. So the first thing I would say is like, because of Drake's fame, there was a point in time where you would talk about being from Canada or Toronto and people were like, where's this place on the map? Like, I never heard this. Now they know, right? So everybody thinks they're special. And it's not just Drake. It's The Weeknd, it's Tory Lanez, it's Party Next Door, it's Daniel Caesar. It's all these artists that we have. The music scene in Canada is exceptional. And we have, kids playing in the NBA. So there's a lot of eyes on, I guess, women on Instagram in Toronto. So it's very common where like an average girl who's super unassuming to have between 2,000 and 5,000 followers, right? I'm not talking about posting thirst traps or like doing extra stuff on the gram, just regular photos, very average, unassuming looking woman, 2 to 5K. And, that's obviously going to gas up their heads, and it does. And then you also have to throw in the lifestyle of the city and how it affects women. It's like, one thing that I noticed compared to other places, like there's a lot to do in London and England. You have like domestic travel. In Canada, domestic travel isn't a thing. Country's too big, and we're too poor to go to the States often. So people tend to just stay in the city and do whatever. And it's just like late night food and drinking. So people, a lot of women that I grew up with, I talk to still, they have problems with their weight. A lot of them get really heavy. So the demographic spread is not great. And the lifestyle is very much, especially you throw in winter, right? A lot of it is like drinking, substance abuse, gaining weight. And there's a large problem in Canada with mental health. You know, the NHS in the UK has its problems, but you guys do a lot. We don't have that same system in Canada. So people's mental health is really bad. And it's taken a really big plunge in the city of late. So when you talk to women, the first thing you'll get a sense of is like they are not necessarily all okay, right? It's really interesting. I could speak to the same demographics of women in Dubai or like in Singapore, and I won't get that same sense of like unease inside of them or like unsettled or just like mental struggles that I get in Toronto. There's a lot of mentally ill women in the city, and it's really sad because they need support. That's not good for dating, right? The other thing to consider is like, well, there are like, let's say like average looking women that I've met that have been flown out to Europe by guys. Some guy will look at them on Instagram and be like, oh, okay, I'll put you on a flight, come to the UK, come to Germany, regular looking girls, right? And that skews their perception. And then you have to throw in the fact a lot of young women don't realize these guys will hook up with you, but they're not going to date you long term. But they're getting gas off all the attention they get. And then you throw in the whole, like I talked about earlier, the generational wealth, the illicit money coming into the city. Let's face it, like I grew up super poor. I'm talking dirt poor, right? My mom never had a salary job my whole life, and we never had a car. So everything that I got, you know, when I got my Benz, I lived in a condo, I had to fight for that. And in my building, and they were nice, but there were these cute Middle Eastern girls. I believe they were from Bahrain. And they had a Maserati. They were a few years younger than me, in school still, and had a Maserati. So it's kind of like you have to consider, as a black guy, especially those of us who don't come from wealth, you have to go through all that discrimination I had talked about, alluded to earlier, just getting a job, renting, doing basic stuff. And then to try to compete, you come out onto the street, you got your job, you're feeling nice, you got your luxury car. You're competing against people, Lamborghinis and Ferraris and Maseratis, right? So that makes it tough on both ends of the spectrum. And what I quite find is that a lot of black men who do well either fall into two camps or three camps, I would say. So one is like, you know, Carlton Banks, super whitewashed, like dressing like the dude from Get Out. Or it's like they're players, right? They invested a lot of time in learning and maneuvering around women, which I have to respect. But that comes at a cost of like your career and other focus. And then the third group I have to say is black men settling for just not desirable women. You know, that is a thing that we see. It's a running joke of like black men dating kind of the leftover women from each group. And you see that a lot in Toronto. Like it was honestly, I was dating an Indian girl like this is 2016, and people made a big deal of it, right? Because she was like relatively pretty, whatever. People made like a big deal because lots of black guys, you know what it's like. Like they'll go and get the girl of low self-esteem who's heavy, right? Oh, she's fat, but she got good credit. Like it's just this weird dynamics. And then you talked about Drake. Well, it's not just the fact that he shined a light on the city. It's all the social media stuff that happens now with Instagram and like all these kind of, you know, inner city like social media pages where now there was a point before I left where I was on Tinder and I got a match. I think this girl's like Filipino, and I was making like an ungodly amount of money because I had 3 consulting jobs paying really good fees. And her first question to me is, how many Instagram followers do you have? So, you know, like I remember when I came back home and I was still single. When I first came, I went to Japan and then Dubai, and I came home. There was a pretty girl. She was, I believe, Chinese or Viet. And she wanted to hook up with me because she thought it was cool because I saw Kendrick in Japan. So, like, you know, it's one of these things of the way I look at it is like low class versus high class, right? If I take literally from the same family, a Chinese girl from Hong Kong, she'll be into like horse races, Formula One, hiking, boating, her career. That same girl, her cousin in Toronto, smoking pot, tattoos, Bryson Tiller, right? You know, whatever urban rubbish is happening in Toronto. And the same thing kind of applies to Indians. Like, I talk to my Indian friends back home and we make jokes about it. There are Indian girls like with tattoos, smoking pot, and like posting themselves sipping lean. You're Indian. Why are you in Canada sipping lean, posting lean on Instagram? So, we kind of get like the low class versions and like new money stuff of the demographics you'd see elsewhere. So if you're think about it, if you're a black man that had to avoid getting in trouble with the law, getting into all sorts of stuff, drugs, things that are bad, and you get successful, and then a good chunk of your peers are into that stuff, the women are into that stuff, it's tough. Then you throw in the real killer, which is, the way generational wealth works. A lot of the good universities are not in Toronto, right? U of T is really good, but the best schools are like 2-hour plus drive outside the city, right? It costs a lot of money to go to, and they're kind of like, how do I put it? Like almost like if you think of London College, the elites go there, right? Same type of deal. Well, those women from your prime dating ages, you're not going to see them because they're gone for 4 years. They may pop up in the summer for a couple of weeks or in the winter, and that's it. And then by the time they come into the city again, they already have their established social groups. They might already be married. So it's really, really tough between all the different things going on. And yeah, just the way like I've literally opened up Tinder on a Discord server, thousands of people, and we've swiped through. We did New York, Toronto, London, Manchester. We did some spots in Asia. And by far the worst in terms of how they present themselves and how abrasive and rude they were was Toronto. It's terrible.
Damn. Wow. So, brother, now that's the Toronto experience. You've been there a chunk of your life, and now you're currently in Japan. You made it out the Matrix, brother. So before we speak about how you made it out the Matrix, give me 1 second, please, brother. Shout out to Mr. Key Lewis for the support. Appreciate you, bro. Big up IP. Just finished the Python course. Also awesome, bro. Awesome. Looking to get a IT consultation to discuss the next steps and options. Yes, indeed. Looking forward to helping you out there, bro. Need Ecuador and Angola info soon. Interesting. Anyone that's been to Ecuador, anyone that's been to Angola, please send me a DM on Instagram. I would love to get those 2 streams done. So please send me a DM on Instagram. Aside from that, can we please get the likes up? We got just under 60 likes, please, but we have over 100 people watching live right now. So can we please get the likes up right now on Instagram, on YouTube, on Twitter, particularly YouTube, please. Please hit the like button. Likes are very important. Press it right now. That would be greatly appreciated. So
before you continue, that super chat from Key Lewis. I wish I could get him on, but it will definitely never happen. But my close friend I've known since the 90s has spent a lot of time in Ecuador, and he is now happily married, no issues. And he did a lot of dating in Toronto and didn't come anywhere near marriage. He went to Ecuador, he's back, he's married, and his life is great. Just throwing it out there.
Bro, we got to get him on if you can, bro.
I'll see what I can do.
Thank you. So, brother, Japan. My first question to you, brother, is how did you get to Japan, brother? Out the Matrix. Break it down for us, bro.
This is super depressing. So I was making, like I mentioned, the good thing, at least about like growing up in Toronto, is that I'm Canadian, and there's all these different aspects of discrimination in super multicultural places. So there was also an element I felt sometimes where like maybe some of the white Canadians didn't like the fact that all the IT was ran by, Indians, and a lot of them that maybe just came to Canada, right? So I was getting the contracts, and I was typically the most qualified, and they were like paying like minimum of $90 an hour, and I had like 3 at a time. So the thing is, I had like a really nice condo. I had just bought a Benz, summertime, and I was really looking at my lifestyle because I had bought nice clothes and I'd gone on a couple dates, different races of women, and all of the dates were terrible, right? Like the women looked good, but there was something wrong with them, either in terms of like maybe really mentally ill or just like super rude and abrasive. And I still have a mentor who runs a marketing business in Dubai, and I always had a strong interest in Japanese culture my whole life, right? Like, everybody's a weeb, go figure. So I, some soul searching, spending time there and just being like, man, I make all this money, and what's my lifestyle like for it, right? If you make a certain amount of money, you'd think you'd have a good lifestyle. My lifestyle sucked in the city, and I would go out and do stuff, and it was still just like not for me. And I was living in a nice neighborhood, but where I grew up, my friends, I mean, it's really bad. Like there was a shooting outside the high school that was near where I grew up, literally this week. 50 shots rang off. So really bad neighborhood. And the thing is, when I'd go to visit my friends, the neighborhood was dicey. So in 2018, there was tons and tons of violence in Toronto. It was one of the years where our homicide rate was actually higher than New York's. Really violent. And then one of the last things that was like the icing on the cake for me was that you might remember, but there was this incel attack in Toronto. 10 people got killed, and it was right in front of my condo, right? And I would just be out and about in the city talking to different people, women, dudes, getting people's opinions on stuff even before this happened. And we were all, at least the men past a certain age, were all of the opinion already that, hey, look, how the women, a lot of them act in the city is really dangerous, and this is going to create a bad environment. And once that incel attack happened, I said, okay, cool, like enough is enough. So summertime, I had a couple dollars, and I said, okay, I need to go and have some fun and enjoy myself and explore the world. So, and I had paid off my condo. It was like 13 months I paid for upfront, so my rent was taken care of. So I said, screw this, I'm going to Japan. So packed my stuff, hopped on a flight. It was like over 10 hours, but it was a comfortable flight, and then I went to Japan. First place, I landed in Tokyo, but I didn't stay in Tokyo first. I stayed in Ibaraki, so just out in the countryside. And then I came into Tokyo and then saw the rest of the area.
Wow, brother. And now you're living in Japan, okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
Brother, tell us how life is in Japan. Tell us the good about living in Japan as a Black man, how you're treated as a Black man, the benefits of living in Japan compared to Canada. Break down the life for us, brother, in Japan right now.
Sure. It's kind of, I think Japan, at least for Black men coming from Canada, and it's funny, like I've met some others who live here. My wife is a teacher, and she actually, funnily enough, taught a child who is half Japanese, half Black, and his dad is from Toronto. So that should tell you something. And I don't live anywhere near Tokyo, but it's kind of like a wake up call and refreshing, right? And just like Black men are not two-dimensional. There's so many sides to us. There's so many aspects to what we know culturally and our goals and our values. But people look at us like at best two-dimensionally, right? And I think certain aspects of life are and our background are appreciated here. So one thing I remember that stood out to me was, in Tokyo, there's obviously a lot of old people, but Japanese old people are very cultured and well-traveled. And I remember one time I was in Akihabara. For those who don't know, that's like the main district in Tokyo that has all the anime stuff. So, all the anime merch and arcades are there. And these old people stopped to talk to me. It was like a nice summer day. And they're telling me the things that they loved about Jamaican music. And it wasn't just like they listened to Vibes Cartel. No, they're talking about like really old Jamaican artists that my mom would have told me about, right? Really kind of like decades old reggae music. And they knew in depth, right? They were very passionate about it. And I'm like, okay, that's interesting. Like you have white people in Canada who have made like Caribbean inspired music, but that's never happened to me in Canada. But here I am in Japan where there's a language barrier and they're appreciating that. It's like, huh, okay. I remember one time there's an express train that takes you from the countryside into Tokyo. And there's like this middle-aged Japanese guy who was like standing, just holding the strap so you don't fall over on the train. And he approached me, he made a face, and he's like, "You work in IT, right?" And I was like, "What?" He's like, "Yeah, you work in IT." I was like, "Yeah, how'd you know?" And we had a conversation. He was an executive at a cybersecurity company. And the contrast, right, of how a lot of service workers or different places, people would harass me in Toronto and just like treat me really weirdly versus in Japan, where this random 50-something-year-old Japanese man's like, "Oh, you work in IT?" It was refreshing, and it was like, oh, okay, the problem is not me. I was just in a sick place. Here I am, and I'm getting treated like a human. And I think the other thing, it's a little bit messed up, but it's the truth, is that, like, in Canada, I get treated like I'm a foreigner, right? When you have all these different racial groups that stick together, and you're the outsider, you're getting treated like a foreigner. But it's really bad because you're the only person for the most part facing that. Well, here in Japan, there is a difference between locals and foreigners, but it's not black people, it's all foreigners, right? So you're not discriminated against because you're black. You know, white people get the same treatment. But even in Japan, things are a little bit more thoughtful. Like, I did notice, like, when I would take the train when I first came to Japan in summertime, there is that complaint that a lot of white foreigners have, where like, oh, Japanese people don't sit beside foreigners on the train. But I did notice people making an effort when the seat was open to go and fill that seat. So Japanese people are really thoughtful, really well cultured, and just like gentle. I've had people buy me meals and start conversations and just be really intrigued about different things, and have honest, genuine conversations that had never happened to me in Toronto. And I lived in Toronto for 25 years, and at that point, I'd been in Japan a couple of weeks, so not a good sign. But for Japan, it's like all that weight of having to worry about like racism and how you're looked at and treatment are just off your shoulders. And going out and dating and eating healthy food and getting around, everything you want to do is super easy here. It's like, it's not a utopia, but it's a utopia.
Wow. So, brother, what about cost of living, right? Compared to Toronto. And we will get to the IT part very soon.
Absolutely.
But I want to know cost of living. How is that in Japan, bro?
Yeah, it's honestly, it is mind-blowingly cheap. When I first came here, I think the yen was like double the value it is now. And even then I was like, wow, this is so cheap. And you have to consider, I have Canadian dollars, right? I didn't have USD or GBP at the time, so my dollar was nowhere near as strong as yours. And still I was like, yeah, renting a place is like 800 Canadian, so like what, maybe 600 US. Getting around was really cheap. Now it's like sometimes I can't believe how cheap things are. McDonald's, even if you want to eat some junk once in a while, is cheaper in Japan than it is in America now. Getting electronics, getting video games. I did like a run of just like some retro video games yesterday, and some of the games that I bought were $2. My rent here, I have a 3-bedroom apartment. It's like a bit over 1,000 square feet. It's like $200 US a month. So
what?
Yeah. In the UK, I think my phone bill was like around that price. So it's just kind of like, I'm not saying there aren't expenses here, but they're not a relevant amount. Coming from Canada, people are used to spending a couple $100 on phone and internet. Here, everything is super cheap, and things are better quality, and the portions are good. So yeah, especially if you're in like London or Toronto, where our salaries are pathetic and the cost of living is sky high, one of the main benefits of coming to Japan purely is the cost of living. You can rent a beautiful apartment somewhere up north in Aomori. Maybe you miss the snow. It'll be $200. I've seen places for less. And like, there's a wide range of like, you can go super cheap and like rustic and old school with tatami mats, traditional Japanese, or you can go to something Western. And it's, I know what you'll see on the internet is that you'll hear like a lot of, and I will say the truth is like, white people are not used to being discriminated against, right? So they come here to Japan and they kind of have these complaints. Dude, when I went to rent, snap your fingers, done, no problems. There are agencies that can help you get settled. Cars are cheap here because I'm sure they make a ton of cars. You can get a brand new car for like $5,000-$7,000. So again, everything is super cheap, and all the online services, let's say you want to get some games secondhand or some electronics, super easy to do. And if you come as a tourist and you want to do some shopping, it's tax-free. So if it's money you're worried about, this is the last place you have to worry about money. I spent more money when I lived in the Philippines than I do in Japan.
Yo, that's insane, bro. Whoa. Amazing, brother. Flipping heck. And brother, right? So that goes on to my next point, brother. IT,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
So you're currently working remotely.
Yep.
In Japan in
Yes.
IT, right?
Absolutely.
You're earning I'm guessing Canadian dollars, okay?
Yeah.
Living in Japan remotely. Brother, yes. Tell us how it's like working remotely in Japan, brother. The lifestyle, the internet speed, the connection, you earning good money, living cheaply in Japan, balling. Break down the IT lifestyle, brother, so we can encourage brothers to actually get into IT and and live the life you're living, brother. Break it down for us, bro.
Sure. The first thing that I kind of I realize is like I think a lot of people when it comes to traveling in different destinations like outdated information, right? So like when we were kids, Tokyo was expensive, right? But the yen was in a different state. The world economy was in a different state. Now you would burst out laughing. I mean, like what people pay to rent a room in London and a 3-bedroom apartment in like a room share, a flat share, is what you would pay to get a whole apartment to yourself here. That would include internet. Um, so working here remotely, there's a time zone thing, right? So depends on who you are. For me, I'm a night owl. Like I'm up right now. It's 1 a.m. over here. It works well for me, right? If you want to deal with people on the West Coast or in the East Coast of North America, if you're a night owl, it's for you. If you're dealing with people in Europe, the time zone difference is not so bad. And then if you're dealing with people in the Middle East, I think it's only like a 4-hour difference. They're 4 hours behind us. Australia, I think parts of it is only a 1 hour difference, and New Zealand's like 4 hours ahead. So it depends on what your type of work is and how you are. And not every, you know how it is right now. Companies are cracking down on remote work, some of them. So it depends on like kind of how your company is. Some companies set up geofencing policies. So if you try to log in from abroad, you can't. I was smart when I was in Canada. As a pro tip, if you work in IT and you want to take your laptop abroad and be quiet, turn on your VPN on your phone, turn on your VPN on your laptop, and see what happens. And if you're getting hit with like errors that you have access blocked, talk to IT about blocking it, removing the block if you can before you leave. But if you're not blocked, you're good to go. So yeah, for me, it just depends on the role because I typically work contract jobs. Sometimes I'll work a full-time, like a permanent job. But yeah, it's pretty easy. You mentioned internet. I'm in the middle of nowhere in the countryside in the sticks, like literally, like one of the last stops on the bullet train, and I have fiber optic internet in my apartment, way faster than I had in the UK, and super reliable. Everything's comfortable here, and in terms of the money and how far the money goes, Japanese people, especially of late, like I came here years ago, but especially of late, they've been a little bit more financially conservative, right? One thing you probably see is like in the news is that PlayStation 5 is not selling as well because they're not spending as much money here, right? The yen is weak, so Japanese people are being a bit tight. Not my problem. When I go shopping and I get what I want, I'm able to pick up everything that I want easily, not think twice about it, stay at nice hotels. On the bullet train, some routes there's like a first class where they like, you get champagne. I can take that if I want, fly business class if I want, and everything is within reach. And I'm making Canadian dollars, right? Like not a good currency, and our salaries are not the best, and still my money goes way further than most people here. The big kind of, how in America, like the women used to say, now it's probably 200, but they used to be like, oh, I want a man who makes 100K minimum, right? So the thing is, like here, it's 10 million yen is like the ideal thing for people, right? So if you make 10 million yen, you're considered a high earner. That is 63,000. So basically 64,000 US dollars. That's not a lot for IT workers, especially, people in the States. A lot of people would scoff at making 70K. So think about if the high earners are considered 70K USD, how much money you have when you go past that. And, if you go to a 7-Eleven here, I can use my foreign bank cards, pull out money. Most websites at this point will accept like foreign cards when I pay for stuff. So yeah, it's super easy. I live a luxury lifestyle here. People here are very comfortable. Houses are cheap, cars are cheap, and those are the people's biggest expenses. But even still, like I have way more economic privilege over them. So I'm really lucky because, growing up, I did not have that in Canada.
Wow. But would you say that IT, you pursuing a career in IT, is probably one of the best decisions you've ever made in your life, bro?
Honestly, I don't even know where I'd be if even I'd be alive right now if it weren't for choosing to work in IT. Because, like, when I was in high school, like I mentioned before, there's a lot of Indian kids there, and they valued going to college and university above everything because that's what the parents told them. It's funny that no one ever says, hey, your parents are poor. I don't want to take financial advice from poor people, but culture. And when I decided to like, not go to college and do my own thing, I wasn't like being a bum, right? I was hanging around. There's some Silicon Valley tech investors who would start an incubator in Toronto, hanging around them, pitching my startup ideas, really focusing on my career and building that out even when I was in high school. and I got a lot of flack, right? I skipped one of my grade 12 exams to go pitch a venture capitalist, and they called my mom. The school called my mom, telling them, "Oh, we think Kyron's doing drugs." Um, so I got a lot of crap from just different people because the culture is so much. Go to school, and then also like people at the time, right? I'm 31 now. People at the time were not as focused on tech, right? So they weren't really encouraging people to go in tech, and especially black kids. Like they literally tried to make me not like when my mom enrolled me in that school. The guidance counselor stopped me from taking a computer class because she thought it would be above my level.
What?
So yeah,
See, brother, that's how they oppress black men and stop black men from building wealth, man. I keep telling you, the West hates black
yeah,
men, bro. There's no
they do.
reason why a black kid should be stopped from pursuing what he wants to do in IT, bruv. What do you mean?
No, it's terrible, and thankfully the school was such that my computer engineering teacher, he had a classroom full of like Linux computers, and he recognized that I was very good at computers, and he would encourage me to spend time there. I would skip class to kick it in his class, and I had another computer teacher where I was in a class beside his doing something stupid because I didn't get to be in the computer class, and he would literally come and just pluck me out that class and bring me in his class and let me do stuff on computers. So very thankful for those two people, those two men, right? But I will tell you, a lot of the people I went to school with right now are screwed financially. They're very poor. People are getting married and into relationships purely to try to survive economically. And, Toronto, like, America got hit hard by the recession in 07, and so did London, but Canada didn't. So things economically just kept chugging along, and things got super expensive in 2013. They spiked, and it's kind of gone up since then. And I would be underwater. Like there are basement apartments in Toronto going for 2,000 Canadian a month, right? So I would be economically dead if I hadn't ignored everybody and said, no, I'm going to focus on IT. I was in a when I focused on my career and I was 18, we were living in a 1-bedroom basement apartment in the hood, me, my mom, and my brother. And I just said, look, the girls have to wait. Making everybody else happy has to wait. I'm just going to focus on my career and really grind that out. And it's paid dividends. Honestly, I don't think any other decision in my life mattered more than me just focusing on my IT career. I would be doomed right now.
There you go, brothers, man. IT is the future. It is, in my opinion, the main career path that future passport bros should be doing. Current passport bros now, remote working in the Middle East, working remotely in different countries, working in the West, earning that dollars or pounds, living in Japan cheaply. Brothers, IT is the way forward. So, brother, with your big salary, brother, I'm assuming, and you living cheaply in Japan, brother, you got leftover money, right, to be in investing, right, brother? So, brother, what do you invest in, brother? What assets do you invest, brother, to give you more wealth, brother? Break it down for us.
Sure. So only very recently, I've always been aware of crypto, obviously. Only recently I've got into crypto because of Litecoin. That's just, I don't want to call it free money, but it is free money. So yeah, of late Litecoin, and then this was probably about 2017 when I built my stock market portfolio. But this is going to be unsurprising, but the main thing that I hold is Microsoft. I'd always believe in the company for a bunch of reasons that are self-serving but obvious, and the company is done perform really well. A while back, I'd invested in a cannabis company because cannabis is legal in Canada now, and that did really well. I was early enough in Snapchat when it was low, really priced low, that I had a thesis that the company is really like a bad company, right? But it's not that bad, and they had good demographics for the users, and that tripled in value. So I made good money there. Made good money off Apple. I've been honestly pretty conservative. Like I don't even own shares in Tesla or Google or Facebook for that matter. But in terms of like kind of just like your typical run-of-the-mill Fortune 500 companies, basically, putting money into Vanguard, that has paid off really well. Like I had some big expenses at a point in 2018, and yeah, when I needed to cover some stuff for a real emergency, I was able to liquidate those stocks, and getting back in the market is super easy. So yeah, I think that's one thing that people need to be aware of, is that the market is moving right now. Millionaires and billionaires are being made. Get into IT, grind it out. Your income's going to grow exponentially. The big thing to do is not to grow don't get into lifestyle creep, right? Don't feel like you need to stay in the West and buy all the flashy stuff to compete and get the girls. No. Move to a real country like Japan, live a good lifestyle for a good cost of living, and try to save, whether it's half of your money or even 75%, and invest the rest of it, whether it's just to putting in the market or what I'm planning on doing is starting a startup and grow your wealth that way. I honestly, I couldn't have did that in Toronto very easily. It's a miracle I was able to, because even just to rent a place, I had to pay 13 months rent up front to compete with the other offers on an apartment in a nice neighborhood, right? And my car insurance in Toronto costed much more than my rent here. So here I'm able to invest. And then the other thing that's important to invest in is yourself, right? So I'm able to get exercise. I have some workout equipment at home, can take trips, I can travel comfortably, eat healthy. It's easy for me to go to the doctor and get medicines and do these sorts of things. So that's been really good. I think now, I don't advise people to do this, but the way I see it, I'm just going to be dumping all of my money into Microsoft. That's my plans for investment going forward.
You don't advise what? You cut off there, brother.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, going forward, I don't advise people to copy this because diversification makes sense. But I'm just going to be dumping the rest of my free money into Microsoft because just the power of AI. I work really heavily with Microsoft Copilot, which uses ChatGPT as the baseline for it. And there's so much opportunity. You look at the growth of AI and then also the fact that companies aren't even done migrating to the cloud. There's lots of legacy apps that have to be rewritten and, made kind of cloud native. There's these three major areas for making a ton of money, and career opportunities are there. But in terms of a stock, that's definitely something I'm throwing money into and kind of pulling out of Apple now because growth is kind of limited, right?
Brother, brothers, this is the way forward for. So hold on, this is the way of life for Black men right now going forward, and I'm being serious here, right? Get into IT, okay? Do my Python course, do Field's cloud course when that opens as well, okay? Get the skill set, get your first IT job, okay? And going on from there, when you start earning big money, you want to invest that money into crypto and stocks. So on my Patreon right now, I'm writing financial intel. If you're not on my Patreon, right, you're losing, okay? If you're not on my Patreon, reading that financial intel that I write, okay, that I'll be doing weekly, okay, where I give you financial tips on stocks and crypto to build your wealth, your assets, you're losing, brothers, okay? Because this is the way forward. Because we live in a world, right? To gain wealth, you need to invest, but you must invest in the right assets. Yesterday, I did a stream on crypto, okay? And hardly anyone joined that stream. It was 40 people watching live. Now on this part, right, there's more people watching. So when we give you that real intel, y'all need to tune in and start taking notes down because I'm not playing no games here, brothers. IT, crypto, stocks, remote work. IT, crypto, stocks, remote work. You're earning monthly income from your IT job. You're investing in stocks and crypto. And we told you, brothers, a year from now, right? Or maybe at the end of this year, when the bull run pops up for crypto, a lot of brothers in the IT space, they're gonna retire, brothers. Or they're gonna be so good, they're gonna be doing so well financially, they might do a part-time job. Crypto will change the lives of many Black men. Okay, of course, do your research. Okay, Amazon stock, Microsoft stock. This brother here, he's smart, bro, because Microsoft, right? They're in AI. They have their own OS that everyone uses. Okay, they have their own cloud system called Microsoft Azure. That's a money-making machine for them. So they're making money in every single areas of their lives. And if you invested in Microsoft stock a year ago or 2 years ago, you would have tripled or doubled your money, brothers. Okay, this ain't a game for brothers, bro. Ain't that right, Kyron?
No, it's not. It's honestly, I have to thank you. You cyberbullied me into getting into crypto, and it is one of the best things that anyone has ever did for me because, like you said, it's free money, and this is where all of the investment is going into these areas: crypto, cloud, AI. And one thing I want to bring up is most of us don't come from rich families, generational wealth. And when you look at what's going to happen in the UK and Canada and America, people's parents are going to get old and their grandparents are going to get even older and they're going to pass away. And there'll be a huge transfer of wealth from their grandparents and parents into our peers. They're going to get hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars that we're going to see none of, right? The reality is that when my peers who aren't black, when their parents die, they're going to get inheritance. When my mom passes away, I'm going to get a bill. And how do you stay afloat? How do you compete in an environment like that? You have to invest your money. And yes, there's going to be different opportunities. During the pandemic, I made a killing investing in a kind of a Vietnamese conglomerate because people wanted to pull their manufacturing out of China. Go figure, right? But in terms of like just making money and staying on top of things, like you said, focusing on a career in IT and investing in tech companies into crypto, that's the only way we could compete with these people who are getting free generational wealth. So you have to, it's not an option, you have to do it or you're going to be done.
Facts, bro, facts. Particularly that part in regards to generational wealth, right? I read an article literally 2 months ago where, when old people die, particularly old white people, there's going to be millions of wealth being transferred to the young upcoming white people. And hardly any black people in the UK have any generational wealth. In fact, a lot of black people, the majority of black people don't even own their own homes. They have no mortgages. They rent out, they're in social housing. So we're doing pretty bad over here in the UK because many, many years ago, slavery, I think I mentioned before, right? Black people were slaves for 4 centuries, okay? Literally free labor for 4 centuries. How the hell do you build wealth when you're working for free, when you're being forced to work for free? And at the time when black people were being forced to work for free, white people were earning money for those 400 years, and they passed on that wealth every time they died to their children. So they literally have a 400-year head start. White people in the West, in America, in the UK, right, in Canada, and every other Western country, or even in Brazil too, or Brazil, Rio, Sao Paulo, okay, anywhere where slavery took part and blacks were slaves, okay, white people have a 400-year head start. The world ain't fair, brothers, man. I'll keep it real with you. I'm angry, bro, because the other day, right, I spoke to a white person I know. He's buying a property, okay, and he got the majority of the deposit from an inheritance and his parents. I look around me, I ain't got that. I ain't got no one giving me money for a property. I got to work for my ish, bro. I look at my black friends, they ain't got no grandparents or parents giving them money for property because we don't have that generational wealth, brothers. Because the world has screwed over the black man for so long, bro. So crypto is our only hope, bro. Crypto stocks, IT. I'll keep it real with you, brothers. Crypto stocks, IT, remote working, investing in tech. IT, bruv. It ain't a game out here, brothers, man. It ain't a flipping game, bruv. This world ain't fair, man. In the perfect world, we need those reparations. Where my checkout, motherfucker? Sorry, where my checkout, mofo? Where our checkout? Where the check for the black man, bro? If America says they're liberal, UK says they're liberal, Canada says they're liberal, okay? If you're so liberal and you know that for a fact, right, that we were screwed over during slavery, where's our check? Cut the check. Because everyone knows that the reason why we're screwed over because of slavery. We've been out here working for free for 4 centuries. How on earth are we going to build wealth, right? If we're being forced to work for free, and during that time, white people are making money, Indians are making money, Chinese making money. So where our check at, mofo? Where the check at? If they were so liberal, right? If they were so liberal, think about it. They talk about we are a liberal country, we have liberal values. If you're a liberal country, where's our reparations, bro? Ain't that right, Karen? This is what I'm saying, right? The West lies to brothers. It's all a lie. It's all a flipping facade, bro. Breaking out for you, brother, man.
No, I think it really stood out to me the most in Canada is like these countries will scream and rant and rave about the liberal values and like even chastise other countries, and then look at how they treat us, right? Um, there had been long problems in schools of Canada, just like black kids getting suspended way more than everybody else, weird stuff happening racially with the police, and just terrible stuff. And a lot of us, yes, obviously there's slavery and things that happened in the past, but a lot of us have to face really bizarre things even now, like stuff that you think some Chinese dude in Toronto has to face the same stuff as come on, right?
I don't know.
And we deal with it. We deal with all the trauma from it, the negative missed opportunities, all the downsides to it. And what do we get? Sometimes maybe we'll get an opportunity because of diversity, equity, and inclusion now. Like that's not, what I mean? That's not adequate. These countries claim to be liberal, claim to care about us. They don't. Most of them hate us, right? Especially because, let's be real, like black men tend to be more conservative, and liberals know that, so they don't like us. The only they like us is when we're in jail and they want like someone to save, right? Oh, we need to release the criminals. That's when they like us. Or we get like murdered by a cop, then it's like, oh, then Black Lives Matter. It's disgusting. And one of the things about me being in Japan is like I can take care of myself here. I can take care of everything that I want to do for my family in life here. I don't have to feel like I'm a beggar, and I don't have to hope for the government that I know hates me. In the UK, you guys are about to have an election. I'm sure like it's been a conservative government the past 14 or so years. I'm sure the Labour Party, the Liberal Party, doesn't like black people either.
Mm.
They forced a black MP to step down recently, a black woman. So I look at everything that's happening, and I'm just like, why not go somewhere where you're treated well, and accepted, versus you're living in the West where you're tolerated sometimes and you're behind generations, right? Like I can't name the amount of times that I've been at a school, in a crappy school in the hood, where some Indian or Chinese kid, essentially their parents are like, oh, the school's crappy, and they move their kids out. I didn't have that ability. Like I mentioned, like my mom didn't even have a car. These kids there were kids when I started working my career, and I was like 18. They were starting college and university. They were getting gifted condos, BMWs. I can't ask my family for $50, right? So there really is, for black men, no time to waste. You have to do the right things. You can't be running around getting, Keisha pregnant and paying child support. Can't be getting in trouble with the law. You can't be wasting your time getting drunk and high. You have to focus on your career, get some bread, give yourself good choices, good opportunities, and make the good choices, right? Otherwise, if you think it's bad now, like if you flip back to when we were kids, rent was way cheaper. Salaries haven't gone up much. Rent has tripled, more than that sometimes. Imagine in 2050 what it's going to be looking like. Imagine how bad things are going to be when people are out of jobs. There's less jobs because of AI, and then to top it off, generational wealth has been passed down. People complain about Chinese tourists running around flashing money everywhere. What's going to happen when all of the kids of other races get their inheritance, right? So now is the time that I don't even say play catch up. We need to get ahead. Crypto is a great way to get ahead. The stock market's a great way to get ahead. And to fund those things, you need some real money. And IT is the perfect career to get into.
Facts, bro. Absolute facts, brother. So, brother, now you're in Japan. I want to know more about your love life, brother, in terms of, is there a special woman in your life, brother? We want to know as to, are the women, which is, in my opinion, Mr. Kyron, the most important question in the history of mankind, brother. Okay, more important than any world war. Okay, so important that and so powerful it can turn water into wine, brother. Okay, it can cause earthquakes and volcanoes to spill out from the ground. Right? We want to know, Mr. Kyron, two questions in one.
Sure.
Is there a special woman in your life? And two, are the women in Japan, brother, checking heavy for black men, brother? Break it down for us, bro.
Sure. It's funny, like I mentioned earlier, that I'm married. So honestly, like prior to living in Japan and spending time in UAE, I don't know that I would have got married if I hadn't moved and traveled abroad, because the dating pool in Toronto is like drinking toilet water that a homeless man just defecated in. It's horrible. It's just bad, right? And then I was dating and I was still getting dates and getting out and whatnot, but I just wasn't liking like the women that I was interacting with. And then I got out to Japan, and I literally had forgotten my jewelry, forgotten some of my nice clothes, forgotten my AirPods, all these little things that people in the West cling to try to set themselves apart. Didn't matter. I was moving, right? Going I was staying out late, going on dates, having the time of my life. Same as in UAE. And when I lived in Dubai, I ended up meeting my wife. So the first thing I would say is to all the men who are looking for like casual fun, let's call it. In Japan, there's no shortage of that. If you're looking for that, go to Tokyo, and that's all I need to say. You don't need to do anything else. Just exist, be a clean, respectable, follow the rules, and you'll get all the stuff that you need, all the fun that you have, and just interact with people and be cool. And in terms of getting married, getting married in Asia is super easy. I would say that in the West, like there's a lot of people who are anti-marriage, and like a lot of people have the idea when they look about planning their life, they're doing it from the perspective that they need to be able to take care of themselves only, right? Versus here, where like, at least as when you come as a black man, as a foreigner, period, there's going to be this aspect of like getting married that people talk about a lot of times, right? So people are planning to move as a unit, and I just find things super easy here, and that's something I never would have had in Canada. And also, people are willing to kind of go on a journey with you, right? This is like a big problem in the West, where, if we're being honest, especially now, men are looked down upon for dating women with age gaps, right? But simultaneously, women want to date men who are finished product. They want you to have the place paid off already, the nice car paid off, take them on vacations. So you're kind of in a precarious position. Here, it's like, no, a woman will look at you, understand who you are, understand what they want, and build something with you. So if you're looking for love, or you're just looking for a fun summer, I highly recommend coming to Japan, because Japanese women are just great to deal with, super easy to interact with. And then also, Tokyo is kind of like one of the party capitals of the world, right? So, lots of foreign women come here. I had one on dates when I first got here, Russian women, Korean women, Middle Eastern, some mixed race women. So yeah, you'll have a great time if you come here, no matter what you're looking for. Just present yourself well, be respectful, especially to the locals, and just practice common sense, and you'll be totally fine.
Wow, amazing, brother. So now, brother, tell us more about your wife, brother, and how she's treating you in Japan, the type of love you're getting. Being married to her, brother, the dynamic, brother. Break it down for us, bro.
All right, this is super screwed up. So, my wife is Filipino. I met her when I lived in UAE. Obviously, there's a big population of Filipinos in the Gulf. And when I first started dating her, I'll be honest, I was super confused, like scratch my head confused at how like nice she was and willing to like just without asking do stuff for me, or like take care of me, look after me. Because I had come from the West, right? In Toronto, it's like the women think it's the second coming of Jesus every time they wake up in the morning. And even if you're doing a lot for them, you ask them to play their role, they're going to give you a stink face, right? Not all of them. There are a lot of great women there, but like men and women in Toronto they don't have a great reputation when it comes to dating. So I start dating, my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, and she's so willing to help me out, look after stuff for me, super family oriented, close to her family as well. And I actually had to like reset my kind of like, what you will and won't do for a woman and how you operate a little bit, because she was just so genuine from the very beginning. It was really refreshing, and that let me feel very comfortable. And then now that we're living here in Japan, she has a job. She's not some high powered lawyer like trying to fight people all the time. She's not like in, I don't know, some overly stressful job. She works in teaching young children. So yeah, it's just like kind of the perfect energy. A is a counterbalance to a black man's energy, and B, to build a family with. It's really refreshing, and it's just like a sense of comfort that, I'll be honest, like the girls that I went to school with that were fighting over hair weave and pizza slices, I would not have got that from them. So yeah, I'm really happy here. And like I also mentioned earlier, I had met other black men from Toronto in Japan who had came here and married, a Japanese woman, or even like a woman from another Asian country who lives here, and they're living super happily. So for those of us who are getting to them years of getting married and having kids, definitely come here. Operate genuinely, right? Because the nice thing about Japan, I'll say, is like in the West, it's super sexual and in your face, but people also try to hide like what their intentions are. It's just stupid. If you're trying to have casual hookups in Japan, be honest with the woman, and they're like totally fine with that. And if you're trying to have a real relationship with her, just try to build something. And from there, life is easy. If you think about having kids, like childbirth, the education system, food, and everything you need to worry about, everything is just super, super well thought of here. So yeah, my wife is very relaxed. She's doing great. She's adjusting well, but that's also the benefit of, I guess, being a passport bro, right? If your wife is foreign, she's from another country, she's not going to have those New York values. She's not going to try to act like Cardi B or Nicki Minaj, right? She's going to be born and raised with different values, and it's easier to start a family with them and get to build trust and have experiences with them. And it's been awesome. I've traveled to a bunch of countries with her. I think we've traveled to like 10 countries together so far. So really good lifestyle.
Oh, wow. Amazing. Let me do super chats here. Shout out to Marvin Lloyd for the support. I'm in Toronto and it's horrible here. Don't come. Yep. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Get yourself a passport, Marvin, and get out that matrix. Shout out to Mr. Babatunde Oloye in the building. What's up, Babatunde? How you doing, bruv? Watching from Melbourne, Australia. 2 a.m. That's what I'm talking about, bro. That dedication while writing some reports. IT remote work is all I think about. About current IP. I need that lifestyle. Soon come, brother. Soon come. Okay. Believe in yourself, brother. Soon come. Shout out to Mr. Eric Power for the support. Appreciate you, bro. This brother story is gold. Yes, indeed. So gold, it should be on the flipping stock market, if that makes sense. Shout out to Mr. Eric Powell for the support again. Please talk about how to get jobs in overseas like Japan, specifically what recruiters to contract, what websites. Fire away, Mr. Kyron.
Sure. So the first thing I want to bring up before I get to Eric Powell's question is that for the brother that's in Australia, for the love of God, I'm begging you, come to Japan. If you have Australian PR or an Aussie passport, Japan does have like a digital nomad visa. And then also you can just pop into the country for a couple of months on a tourist visa. It's not really a big deal. And obviously you don't need to apply in advance. You come, fly in, they give you the visa. And if you end up getting married, you can stay. So that's even easier. Australia, like he mentioned, he said it's 2, right? It's a 1-hour time zone difference. So imagine, and Australian salaries are like 30% higher in IT than they are in Canada. So imagine him having, like 170K Aussie dollar salary, living in Japan, and it only being a 1-hour time zone difference. Think about how good his lifestyle would be.
Amazing.
Because rent in Australia, a place in Sydney is like $3,500 a month for a 1-bedroom apartment, versus here where you can get one for less than $1,000. So if you're in Australia, especially, please, I'm begging you, come to Japan, save yourself. And then to Eric Powell's question, where he's asking how to get a job overseas in Japan, what recruiters to contact, and what websites. So the first, this is a little bit of insider game. If you do not have a degree in IT or in computer science or something like that, you can still work in Japan. Most people don't know this. So there is a exam held twice a year. It's called the ITPEC examination. Essentially, it's like a couple of countries. So like Singapore used to be a part of it, but there's Malaysia, there's the Philippines, there's Vietnam, Japan. They're part of this group where essentially they have a shared examination to evaluate young people's IT skills, right? Like young people coming into the workforce. And if you pass, they have different exams, but there are 2 levels. And if you pass one of these 2 levels, it actually, in the Japanese visa system, is the equivalent of you having a computer degree. So you actually don't even need to go to college. You can take your Microsoft certs, get your practical experience, and write that exam. You can fly to the Philippines and take it in English, and you're good money to come to Japan, even without a degree. So if your degree doesn't match or you don't have one, you're still good. The other thing is, if you don't necessarily, you can work as like a technical BA, and the requirements for that for a visa is different. The other thing to look at is if you have an Australian passport, a British passport, or Canadian passport, there are working holiday visas where you can come and work in Japan for like a year, and it's like free, so you don't need to necessarily have any restrictions on your work. You can work a career job. And then when you're already on a visa, switching visas is easy. The other last piece of inside game I have to give everybody listening is that Japan and the UK are similar, that there are visa requirements listed on paper, but it's up to the officer, right? So if you meet the requirements, Japan's Japan, you're going to get it, right? But if you're close and it makes sense, you're still going to get the visa. So don't worry too much about getting settled, because Japan is very, very well thought out. There are different means for you to get in the country. Another way for you to get to Japan is to take a language. If you want to learn Japanese, enroll in a language school. You can work part-time, do your thing. There's tons of part-time jobs in Japan. That's another benefit. There are part-time IT support jobs in Japan. So you can study Japanese part-time and then in the evening work and do help desk support. It's a good way to get going. You could also go to a regular college, university, or you can come here like a lot of people do. I don't recommend this if you don't like teaching. If you like teaching, then it's great. You can come in as an English teacher. There are programs like the JET program. There are private institutions you can go to that can easily sponsor a visa for you. And that's something well documented you could look into, teaching English. Tons of ways to get in. Then he asked about kind of contacting recruiters. So the interesting thing about recruiters I found, especially in Tokyo, is that a lot of them are foreigners. So the recruiters, one of them I talked to when I was in Tokyo, she actually lived on the same street as me in Toronto. So there's people from like Canada, Taiwan, the States, the Philippines, France even. So what I found was really helpful is, number one, you have to have a good LinkedIn page, right? And you have to, in the job preferences, what you should do, change your location to Japan, and then set yourself as available looking to work, and then the location, set it to Japan. That's one thing that you could do. The other thing you could do once you have a good LinkedIn profile and obviously a great resume is you could start reaching out to people here. It's not a market like America where that's frowned upon. You can see a job posting from like Randstad, Robert Walters, any of the big agencies that exist in all of our countries exist here in Japan, right? So contact the big agencies, upload your resume, reach out to big companies, especially once you talk to like one company that's famous for hiring foreigners is Rakuten. It's like kind of the Japanese Amazon or eBay. Rakuten hires a ton of foreigners in technical roles, so you should apply to Rakuten. Of course, Sony does as well, so apply to Sony for everybody who likes PlayStation. And then any major foreign company that's here, especially if they're European or American, a lot of them will have English-speaking only jobs that are tech jobs somewhere in Japan, typically Tokyo or Yokohama. Apply for those, so look for those. And recruiters, like I mentioned, contact the ones at the big agencies because they're typically Westerners anyways. They know what it's like to come as a foreigner. So Robert Walters, Randstad, any of the big agencies, really, you should just reach out to. And that's a good way. Another way is if you're either young or maybe you're like really experienced. If you're on either end of the spectrum, super junior or like experienced like Theo is, one thing you can do to get to Japan is a lot of people sometimes will take an intermediate step. So maybe apply for jobs in Hong Kong or Singapore. Singapore's taxes and Hong Kong's taxes are very low. The salaries are super high. And then once you have experience in Asia, a lot of recruiters will be trying to recruit you to other Asian countries, especially Japan. If you work in Hong Kong, you can expect people reaching out to you from Japan, and same with Singapore. There's so many means to get into Japan. And then the last one, I got to be honest, old tried and true. A lot of people come here, hang out, do whatever job they need to do that's legal, like to get a visa, whether it's like working part-time as a student. And then they just find a Japanese woman, fall in love, and then the rest kind of falls into place. So that's always an option too. Either, come and teach here or be a student. Get your IT career together, your LinkedIn. If you don't have a degree, get the ITPEC exam done. Or just come here and try to fall in love. It's super easy to get settled here, and it's a very open kind of recruitment culture. You also have to understand that there's contract work here, and that's very well established and mature, which is not the case in Canada. It's actually even more mature, the contract market, than it is in the US, I find. But for full-time jobs, they tend to keep people for years and years and years. So bring your best foot forward. Make sure you're always at least 1 minute early. You can never be late and never be on time. Japanese people, what they tend to do, show up a few minutes early outside and then enter the building 1 minute before things start, right? So you have to be early, wear a suit, be clean. If you can shave, everyone's religion is different, I get it, but if you can shave, try to be clean. They're very flexible with foreigners though, but try to blend in as best you can. Make sure your suit is crispy, your shoes look good. Don't wear cologne because Japanese people just shower and take care of themselves, so no heavy scents. go in there, communicate well, present yourself well, understand that sometimes foreign recruiters, like, there's going to be a lot of weebs that move to Japan, so they might be a little bit nerdy or whatever, but be like friendly, make sure you're not intimidating, and then you're good to go. It's super easy to get around here.
Amazing breakdown. Shout out to Yu-Gi-Oh Master. For it's time to duel. If you know, you know.
Yes, sir.
Yo IP still on my online business grind. Operation Ace is going to happen. Let's go. Hopefully it goes well for you, brother. Appreciate you, Yu-Gi-Oh Master. Thank you, bro. Awesome. So
before you
next
go ahead,
question, of course.
For Yu-Gi-Oh Master, since he's also a fellow fan of Yu-Gi-Oh, I grew up playing Yu-Gi-Oh, and that's been another great thing about coming to Japan. The amount of exclusive Yu-Gi-Oh merch that I could get here, cards and different stuff, it's been great. Stuff from the 90s and things that are like only limited to Japan and really cheap. If you love anime, whether it's like Yu-Gi-Oh or Dragon Ball or Evangelion, or even just video games, that side of yourself where like maybe in the West people look at you like you're a nerd or weird. There's like 60-year-old men on the train that I see in the mornings reading One Piece manga. So if you want to come and enjoy yourself in Japanese culture, definitely make sure you pop into Tokyo and check out the rest of Japan as well.
Amazing, man. This is awesome. Brothers, again, IT can allow you to live in Japan permanently and, live the life you truly want to live, man. Like I mentioned, IT, remote work, crypto, stocks, okay, it's very important. Okay, brothers got to start thinking like that. And I'll be dropping a lot of financial intel but on my research on the Patreon. So go and join the Patreon too. Okay, go and join the Patreon. So next question for you, brother, is so what don't you like about Japan as you're living there, brother? Any bad things you've noticed that you don't like?
Honestly, it's really, really short. And the thing I've learned about Japan from my first trip here, living here, it's even more obvious, but like some things won't make sense and don't make sense, but overall the system works, the people work, everything is functional, safe, and you're going to be fine. So you kind of just need to you're not the main character, right, of an anime. You need to just accept that. So one positive is like, for example, every year, employers have an annual health screening, right? So in the West, it's like a big problem. People don't get screened for cancers, especially some that target men. And a lot of Black men get sick and fall ill and die. In Japan, they're checking to make sure that you're healthy. So that's built into this functioning system. Within the system, there's going to be cultural nuancy things that really make you scratch your head. So an example is like Japanese people are very sensitive to noise. So it's important when you come here, no talking on the train because they hate it. No being super loud, unless you're at a club or an event where it's okay. But even then, sometimes, you got to like just look at how the Japanese people are and try to mirror yourself to that and just be a little bit more humble even than they are. But one thing that I found is super strange is that, so some places, and I don't mean fancy restaurants, right? And I don't mean during peak hours, will be like, hey, and everyone's always going to be, for the most part, super polite here, but they'll be like, hey, no talking on your cell phone when you're in the restaurant, even though like all the other tables are super loud, you can't talk on the cell phone. That's just like a rule for them, no, right? Because Japanese people are super sensitive to noise. However, when you go into department stores, they will play the same ad at max volume with like ridiculous jingles on repeat. And then also, one thing I found is that, especially during like voting season, there will be vans driving around early in the morning blasting political ads for certain candidates that they have. So it's kind of like they can be uptight about noise. And I'm cool with that. Like, a quiet environment for a brother working in tech is great. But then in other ways, it's like, well, flashing neon lights and it's like the total opposite of quiet. So that's like a weird, people describe it like just as outright autism. So parts of Japanese society, I could be almost like autistic. And then I guess the other thing is that like Japanese people are very much about rules, right? And like rules is how the society keeps together. So I remember when I first came here, I went to go visit my friend. She was going to a college in Tokyo, a university. So I went to go, and I had to use a toilet. And I asked if I could use a toilet, and the security guard said no. But I understood because I wasn't a student there. Those are the rules. Cool. And there's, convenience stores have toilets, they're clean, so no problem. He wasn't trying to be a jerk. That's just the rules, right? Protecting people, following the system. I'm okay with that. But I remember I went to this is like way out of Tokyo. I went to like this, it used to be like an izakaya sit down style restaurant. Now since the pandemic, everything's changed. It turned into like a fast food chain. So I went to go grab a meal, and instead of them like serving you, I guess now it's like a fast food chain, this one place. They give you like a cup, right? That you fill your soda. And the cup is on the tray. I'm the only customer there, right? No one else is there. And like it's in a mall and it's super quiet. It's the middle of the week in the middle of nowhere. And I take the cup to go fill it up at the machine right over my shoulder, right? And the guy gets mad at me and literally yanks the cup out of my hand. And I'm trying to understand. He's like, oh, you have to wait until your food is done. Your food is placed. So he yanks the cup out of my hand. I'm like, what the hell? And then he turns around, takes the food, and puts it on the tray. And then he's like, now you can get your drink. And I'm just like, yeah, this is why you guys, your economy is tanking. Like sometimes they lose sight of like, here's what's the rule and here's what like makes sense. Because not for nothing, if you don't do that to an American, they throw the cup at your head or worse, right? And especially when you walk into an establishment or like you're at a place and you're the only customer there, typically people are like, oh crap, now to get some money, right? So that's like a level of like, okay, you're just being autistic about it. Like, I get that the rule is typically, please wait until your food is served to fill up your drink, but like, it's there's no one there. So, yeah, sometimes they can be a little bit, for lack of a better word, brain dead about stuff like that. But honestly, that's very rare. And what I find is that living in the countryside, that goes right out the window. Like in Tokyo, where there's tons of people, there's a point in time, Canada's population is big now, but Tokyo used to have a population bigger than Canada itself. They would be way more uptight about like following certain rules. I live like 3 hours out in the countryside, and that's not a thing. So just try to understand like people are going to be, not everyone, especially young people, they don't care. And then like senior citizens don't care either. Follow the rules, do the best you can. But sometimes, especially when there's like a language barrier, you're not understanding everything, things are going to happen that don't make sense. You just kind of have to chalk it up to like they're addicted to rules. That's their drug here. Everything is a rule and they follow them.
Wow. Okay. Now, brother, let me ask you about so you mentioned that there's a yearly screening at
Yes.
the workplaces. So you get a job in Japan, and there's a yearly screen where you go through MRI scans, CT scans, blood tests, to make sure that nothing's gone on in your body. I did not know that, bro. Does every company do that in Japan? Is that a law?
Every single, I don't know if it's a law, but every single employee does it. It's a seasonal thing where the company, they give you like a slip and they send you to like a local clinic and you will get all these tests done on you just to make sure that you're good. And the report you get it's like, I've never seen anything like it. They give you a full booklet of all your vitals. Like it's a video game, like you're checking your character stats, talking about, you could do this differently. There are like diagrams to show you how healthy you are, similar if you've played like role-playing games. And it's really in depth. And you find out if there's anything you need to change diet-wise, what your vitals are like. It's brilliant, especially with women, like, worrying about the reproductive health. That stuff they get information about as well. And the screening is super easy. It's not invasive. And they do like a couple of different tests. It depends on age and different stuff. But if you do want to go get an MRI, waiting in the UK and America and Canada is like hours. I had an MRI, blood work, and a CT scan and multiple x-rays done, and I was out of the hospital. It was like 2 hours when I went to go on my own. All of that done and talk to the doctor. So yeah, like healthcare here is like a dream. It's not entirely free. So work will send you for the screening. That's free. The healthcare system here is kind of like insured, where it's a copay. So the government, if you earn under a certain amount of money, you get insured by the government. And then, beyond that, typically work gives you insurance. But like, it's forgettable. Like I had to get some eye drops at a point and I paid $6 for them. Right. Like other medicines have been even cheaper. So yeah, like especially if you're an American, you definitely want to come here just as we get older to take care of your health, because everything is healthy. There are systems in place to keep you in shape. I forget the name of it. Theo would know, but in the morning on the radio, they play this kind of announcement, and all the old people get up, and it's like all these stretches and like it's instructional stretches and stuff to do just to keep people in shape. You'll see old people, jogging in the morning, people walking their dogs, people take care of their health here, and society makes you eat healthy food. When I go out to eat fast food, I'm eating like, beef that's really healthy, vegetables, rice, miso soup that's really good for you. So it's a very, very easy place to come in to eat healthy, and I really appreciate that.
Wow, incredible, brother. So language, right? So obviously, you
Yep.
said you spoke to a doctor. Do you speak to me in Japanese or in English, and then that aspect, communication?
It's interesting. What I find is that I think just because of like how doctors are and like their backgrounds, a lot of them speak English. Like, yeah. When I had to go to an ophthalmologist to get something taken care of for my eye, he spoke better English than anybody in Liverpool. I mean, I understood every single word he was saying. Super easy to understand. The reception staff understood enough English, and then to top it off, like like I said, I'm in the middle of nowhere, and signage is still in English and Japanese, so it's very easy to get around. And then now, for better or for worse, like a lot of stuff is like screens and tablets, and there's like buttons to switch stuff in English. But like, for example, let's say I want to go fill up my Metro card in Tokyo, right? And I go to a machine. It's easy enough to follow along in Japanese, but there is a button you could just press and it just switches to English, and the announcements are in English. There's like booths in the train stations, especially the major ones, where if you have a problem with your card or you lost something, you need help, directions, they can pull out a map and help you, and they speak English. And a lot of the police, even if it's not perfect, they speak enough English if you're ever like in need of some help. So I would say, ironically, and this is kind of sad, but like, the UK has like a very diverse population, people from Africa, different parts of Asia. Like, I lived in Manchester, England. I've lived in Vancouver, Canada, Toronto, Canada. The English language levels are not so far off in Japan. You'd be kind of surprised. So yeah, it's super easy to get around. And then the little bit of Japanese that I do speak here and there is like very little things. Ask for a bag at a 7-Eleven. It's dead easy to do everything. I think the only thing where you might struggle sometimes is like if you have to go to a real Japanese website, there's not an English language option. Then you might have to use a little bit of Google Translate, but like it's easy enough to get around. One thing I should just as another inside piece: hotels in Japan are super cheap right now because the yen is worthless. But if you want even cheaper hotels, find the Japanese booking sites, because not all the hotels that Japanese people go to will be on like Hotels or Booking.com. They'll be on Japanese language only websites, and the prices tend to be cheaper. So as you kind of get comfortable bouncing between English and Japanese, even if you are using Google Translate, that's that will help you a lot. And my wife, a woman being a woman, she's picking up the language very well. She can speak sentences and communicate with people. Me, I've been too busy learning about AI and work stuff. But if you have a woman with you, when I first came here, I had a woman friend help me as well. That's just like a good way to get stuff taken care of too. So yeah, it's pretty easy, but don't be afraid to pull out Google Translate. Japanese people sometimes will have even a little like portable dictionary sometimes where they'll type in a word in Japanese and say it in English, or they'll just use their iPhone. So, try to learn Japanese as much as you can. It's not an easy language, but it is rewarding to learn. And if you don't know any Japanese, I mean, I knew nothing when I came here, and I was totally fine the whole time. And like I said, I wasn't even in Tokyo at first.
Awesome, brother. Is healthcare free in Japan?
Kind of like no, but yes, but no. So it's a copay where, like I mentioned, if you're under a certain income threshold, the government insures you. If you make a certain amount more, your workplace is insuring you. I think there's like a bit of crossover between that. So you will go to the hospital and have to pay like a deductible, but it's like, I mean, like a McDonald's meal in America will cost you more money. So, it's kind of like, hey, we're making you pay a little bit of money just so you don't abuse the fact that it's basically free, which is smart. And you do get better service for that. The other thing I'll say that was interesting is like one time I had to use the hospital when I was in Tokyo. I got a little bit hurt and I went to the hospital. And long story short, I didn't have my credit cards on me because I just had to leave. And they were just printed invoice, and like literally I could come back later and there's just like these kind of PCs near reception, and you could just go and pay the bill on your own. So it's not like literally in the Philippines, you go to a hospital and you have a hospital bill, you have to pay it or they won't let you leave. Security will physically stop you from leaving. Japan is not like that. The country has too much money. So, yeah, you don't have to worry about anything like that here.
Wow, amazing. Hold on, bro. Shout out to Mr. DJ Brobot. I agree on using hiring agencies to get jobs. Most IT tech firms hire contractors through them to fill positions. You can flip these into permanent jobs. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Is that common, brother? So if you're working on a contract basis in a job in Japan, right, IT, it can turn into a permanent role on your performance. Is that quite common?
100%. You know, Japanese companies loved keeping people long term. Like if it's a project and they have to do like staff aug for the project, that's different. But if you're hired for something operations wise, right, and you do a good job, people trust you, you build a good report, 9 times out of 10, they're going to extend an offer to you to keep you full time because, like, let's be realistic. Who wants to have to go back out to market again and interview people and pay a recruiter again? It's just annoying. So, because of their culture of retaining talent, they'll definitely be likely to extend an offer to you. It's very, very, very common here. So he's totally right.
Amazing, amazing, brother. So, next question for you, brother. Now it's
Sure.
now in terms of foreigners in Japan, brother. So obviously
Yes.
Japan attracts, from what I'm seeing, brother, dudes who are angry about multiculturalism in the West. You know,
Yes.
too much of a certain group of people. They see
Yes.
Japan is 99%, you know, whatever Japanese, etc., etc.
Yes.
So, brother,
I
have you
agree
come
with
across? So, brother, have you come across those kind of people, brother? Have you come across any sort of racism from those kind of people, brother, or any other
Yeah.
groups of people, Indians, Chinese out there in Japan, but and those groups of people who hate multiculturalism in Japan, brother? And how common is that?
Sure. So one thing I will say is like, you know, because I talked about Indian and Chinese people in Canada, and obviously there's like different groups within that. Like I mentioned, people who grew up there, people who are like the saying is like fob fresh off the boat, new arrivals to Canada. There's so much nuances to that. In Japan, I find the Indian, Chinese, Vietnamese, the immigrants that live here, whether it's they were born here or like they moved here, they're so sweet and just nice. Like it's a total opposite of what you'll run into in Canada. People are really kind here, who are foreigners that are not white, right? Um, and that's a really good feeling. It's kind of like, hey, you know, we're all in this different country. We're not Japanese, getting adjusted. It is a good thing. Good, very like good hospitality. White people, though, oh boy. There's a million things that I could say about how a lot of white people are mad about race mixing. Granted, there's a ton of white people who are totally cool with that. I'm not saying this is all of them or even the majority, but like there's a lot of white people if you open Twitter that are very openly mad that Japan has immigrants here, right? Even though it's like there's 2 million immigrants and 110 million Japanese people. You know what I mean? Like, and then the other thing is like, let's be very clear here. There's a big difference between somebody coming legally on a visa to fill a job, right? The job is pre-assigned to them. Some people, a lot of people don't even stay permanently, versus in Europe where people are coming on boats, don't speak the language, are getting government subsidies, and are not working. People in the West are stupid and can't differentiate between illegal immigration and refugees and actual immigrants. It's something that I found coming from Canada. I notice a lot in Europe. People are really stupid and need to go read a book. The reality is that immigrants who come here in Japan, most of the time, especially when you talk about like not Western countries, they're coming from like the Philippines, Malaysia, Indonesia, and they might not fit in 100%, but Japanese people generally appreciate them because they tend to be sweet and they do jobs that are desperately needed here. I believe there was a point where I looked like there was more openings than there were, like more job vacancies than there were working age adults in Japan. Like it's ridiculous the amount of jobs that are just sitting, and companies are struggling. You know, even the anime industry right now is struggling because they're struggling to hire people. So at least in terms of locals versus immigrants, there's not that weird dynamic in America. It's like, oh, you guys are taking our job. They don't think like that here. They want skilled people to come here and integrate. And like I said, all the other groups are fine. The white people here, it's interesting. I've met some of the nicest white people I've ever come across, well balanced. You know, one thing in Canada, because like I mentioned, like you'll be in a neighborhood and it'll be like 70 or 90% one race. I didn't really get to interact with white people that much in Canada. Um, in Japan, I did, and the white people I met when I stayed certain places were cool. Then there's the flip side where there's like And I'm not talking about guys who are like nerdy or a little bit of misfits. That's going to happen in Japan. But I'm talking about like I went to a festival where it was like a mixture of rock and hip hop. So like Skrillex performed, Kendrick performed, MGMT performed, and there were white skinheads there with shirts making fun of Black Lives Matter. And their shirt said "Lives Matter" with a question mark.
Wow.
In Japan. So, you know, there is kind of this like weird fetish that some white people have, thinking that like, oh, Japan is like the last bastion of not race mixing and they don't tolerate these immigrants, even though all the white people are the majority in these countries and voted in politicians to let the immigrants come in. You know, they have all these like weird fantasies about Japan instead of fixing their own country. And then a lot of them also think that like Japanese people worship them, which is not particularly true. And they think it's okay for them to race mix with Japanese people, but everybody else mixing races is disgusting. Sometimes those people will pop up. I was one time, this was 2018, I was in Akihabara. I was with a Middle Eastern girl, and somebody shouted the N-word with the hard R in Akihabara Station. I couldn't find, it was packed, so I couldn't find the person. But boy, I could tell what race they were from that voice. They weren't Japanese.
What the flip?
Japanese
Jeez.
person, you would know from how they pronounce the letter R, right? And I remember also in that same district, I went to like it's like a sit-down restaurant, and I was getting a lot of uncomfortable, weird stares, disgusted stares from people. Wasn't the Chinese people, wasn't the Indian people, wasn't the black people, wasn't the Japanese people. Take a guess at who it was.
White.
Yeah, some Dutch people, right? It's like, okay, great. You don't like me, too bad. Go back to South Africa. But again, it's like, I don't necessarily, the rare times that it's happened, I don't take it seriously because it's just an indictment against them, their character. And, oh, you guys are so butthurt about your countries that you guys are the majority in, you guys make the policies, you guys be in the state they're in, that you want to blame everybody else, right? And then you want to come to Japan and like try to worship Japan, and Japan looks at you guys like you guys are weird. Like, you're losers. I can't be bothered to go back and forth with them or engage with them because they're pathetic. They are. Like, I'm sorry, a lot of people have really negative things to say about the African immigrants in Europe. Well, who's letting them in the country, and who has policies that let them come on boats into the country and integrate and give them money? It's white Europeans, right? So there is this thing in the West, I'm sure we've all experienced it, where like black people get blamed for the sins of white liberalism that we didn't even ask for. And then there also is the pushback of that, where it's like, in America, people tend to blame criminality only on black people. And they'd be like, oh, Japan's going to crumble when immigrants come there, even though Japan is not stupid and doesn't have, like that Mexican border where people are flying all around the world to cross the Mexican border to get into America undocumented. Japan's an island. You try walking to Japan, you'll drown, right? People are stupid and don't process that. So there are like weirdo white supremacists that like really put Japan on a pedestal for brain dead reasons that want to come here. But let's be honest, most of these white supremacist dudes don't have $22. They can't come here. And they're not going to like it here because they're misfits back home, and they're going to come here and be losers. So yeah, like, I don't know. I definitely see it increasing on Twitter, like white supremacist conservative talking heads talk about Japan like it's this last bastion of like, anytime Japan does something, oh my God, the country's losing itself. Just ignore them. They're bums.
It's not even their country. It's not even their country, bro.
Not at all.
It's
weird. Like condescending. It's like your country's a sack of crap, right? Japan's GDP is bigger than most countries on the planet, and you think you can tell Japan how to operate? Go fix your country.
Facts. Weird, bruv. Absolutely weird. So, brother, we are at the 2-hour mark, brother.
Yes, sir.
Up to you if you need to leave or stay on, brother. It's up to you, brother. I just want to make sure you have that.
No, I'm good. I got my sparkling water, which was cheap here, and I'm comfy.
Okay, awesome, brother. So, next question for you, brother, right, is society, right? Now, from what I'm hearing, brother, from what you see, right, obviously Japan isn't perfect, but could you agree with me that it appears that they have a lot of care for their people? And I'll tell you why. Number one, it appears to me that most graduates who come from university, right, in Japan, normally get a job very quickly in Japan.
Correct.
I've heard that's very, very common. Whereas in the West, right, it could take
Forget
someone
it.
a year.
You're out in New
If you're
York City.
black,
Yeah.
if you're
More.
black, more, and you got to be
Yeah.
doing odd jobs, to get into your field of study that you did for university. Number two, the healthcare stuff, right? Where obviously they got to do tests. Imagine that in America and UK, bro. Like never, they don't really care about your health.
Not at all. Yeah,
I've
especially
noticed
black
that,
people.
bro. Especially black people. Can you imagine them actually, having an incentive where you got to get tested for health in the job you are in America and the West?
Oh,
Very
people go
rare.
crazy. It's discriminatory. You're infringing on my rights. How dare you try to make me get tested for my health? I'm healthy. You know how that goes.
It's weird, man. Like I think that should be, obviously, like there are conditions that do affect black men, certain diseases,
Yes,
and I think
cancer, diabetes.
Yeah, so why don't black men get tested for that, frequently by job? Weird. Number three, brother. I would say it just appears that it's cheap, right? Like Japan's been cheap for a long time, since the bubble. So
yes,
it's very livable, right, for the average person to live a comfortable life in Japan that's Japanese. So, but would you say in general, like Japan government, society just care about its people overall?
Yeah, honestly, my wife, she grew up in Dubai, but when she was super young, she was in the Philippines, so a third world country. And, Canada might as well be a third world country because, and I know there's been cuts to it, but the UK, there's like school lunches, right? And in the US, there's school lunches. In Japan, they have these elaborate, healthy, tasty school lunches. And in Canada, we didn't even have school lunches.
Wow.
Yeah. They get like different types of foods, like they have some of these schools, like they will have their own nutritionist that goes between the schools and puts together, like has the cooking staff figure out what are meals that the kids need. A nutritionist. There's school nurses, right? So I look at how the system looks after the youth, and it's so safe in the mornings, whether you're in Tokyo or the countryside, you'll see kids walking to school alone or in groups where they'll be in it's cute. They'll be in a group together, and then they'll have like an older kid or like a mom walking them to school, and they'll have like a flag so that before they cross the street, so the cars stop. It's just like, one of the most innocent, peaceful things. And it's like, they go to school, they're taken care of, society's peaceful. And then you think about, like you mentioned, okay, cool, you're out of high school, you're out of college. Now it's time to go to work. Well, there is a job waiting for you, right? And okay, now I'm an adult. It's time to go and buy a house. Well, there are houses here for less than $50,000 US a house, right? There are apartments that are dirt cheap. So whether you want to rent or to buy something, it's rhetorical. Like if you work at a convenience store part-time, you can afford to rent a place on your own in Japan. If you need a car, those are cheap. Car insurance is cheap. It's kind of like all the things in life that you need to be okay are taken care of. But then beyond that, this is the big problem that I find in the West. They talk about in the news. It's called the death of the third place, because you go home and you go to work, right? And that's it for people. In Japan, people have hobbies. Like there's a car dealership I walk by, and I literally on the weekend will see people playing instruments, like with sheet music, clarinet, the saxophone, like practicing music, right? There are arcades. I see people obviously do car racing. Go figure. There are people that go to bookstores, lots of domestic travel. So the big thing that I would say that's beautiful about Japan is that there's so much to keep you occupied and entertained and happy, versus the West, where all really people have is work, home, the internet, and drinking. In Japan, you have a complete lifestyle. And to get access to these things, you know what it's like to be going to a club in London. You have to look the part. You probably, if you're a black man, you want to go be in line with a girl who's not black, unfortunately. And you have to, Japan is like, you want to have fun, have a nice night out, just go and have a nice night out. There's not even a tipping culture here, right? So you mentioned about society just being more thoughtful and like nicer to people. Absolutely. It's just like, even I didn't even know that they had this, but like some government employees will get their housing provided to them by the city or the government, like the larger municipality. So the government of Japan, whether it's like federal or like lower down, they take care of their people, and it's really amazing to see.
America, UK, Canada should be ashamed of themselves. The richest countries in the world, some of the richest countries in the world, right, doesn't even care about its own people like that. It is disgusting to hear and see. I'll be honest with you, brothers, man. Uh, the West has lost its way completely. It really
Absolutely.
has. Oh man, it infuriates me.
Do you want to hear something funny?
Please.
Even with like, you know, in the West, inflation's eating us everybody alive. Like you hear even like upper middle class people struggling. Well, Japan for years had negative inflation because, you know, in the pandemic, all these countries printed a ton of money and then their economy kind of got hit by that. Japan did the printing money thing 2 decades ago, right? So they kind of weathered this inflation for the most part pretty well. And even then, you know, like groceries here are dirt cheap. Like I mentioned, food, good quality food, cheaper than Canada, cheaper than the Philippines. And the local government still sent us vouchers to go and get groceries at discounted prices. Just be said, oh, because of inflation, we're giving people these vouchers to discount your groceries.
Wow. Says it all. Says it all. Shout out to Mr. Hold on. No, shout out to Mr. Darius Chamberlain for the support. Appreciate you, bro. Did you get those video clips I sent you on IG? No, I didn't, brother. If you can send me a message on IG, maybe I did, but maybe I forgot. That'd be great, brother, so I can know who you are. Thank you, bro. Shout out to Mr. Black Muslim in the building. What's up, Black Muslim? Hope you're doing well, brother. On this cold Sunday over here in the UK. Have you ran into any Japanese Brazilian woman? By the way, Kyron.
So that's a great question. Thank you, Black Muslim, for asking. So most people don't know this, but there is a huge population of, it has to do with history and a ton of other stuff, but Brazilians living in Japan, and there's lots of mixing that's happened. And when I say they're beautiful, I was in Harajuku with these two girls. I was just hanging out. We're getting some like pancakes and food, and they're shopping. And we were in a clothing store. It's two girls that were good looking themselves, and this Japanese Brazilian woman walked in, and like you could hear a pin drop. Like she was otherworldly beautiful. Like never seen someone that beautiful in my life. And they're around, especially if you're in Tokyo and some other parts of Japan, you'll see them. So yeah, Japanese Brazilians are around. There are some Japanese people that even speak Portuguese, funnily enough. So you will run into them if you look hard enough.
Damn.
And Japanese people also kind of like Hispanic culture. So it's not just Brazilians. You'll find Mexicans coming here, Colombians, you know, Venezuelans, like other Hispanic people pop in all the time.
Do they like black men? Japanese Brazilian chicks, but are you seen them with black men? Do they give you looks? Are they with black men over there? Break it down for us.
I've seen them date everybody. Like that's actually kind of the interesting thing. What you'll find is foreigners in Japan tend to date everybody. If they have a preference and they grew up here, sometimes they'll stick to like Japanese people. But for the most part, you do see them dating white guys, black guys, everybody, Indian guys, Japanese guys, Chinese. There's not a barrier here.
Awesome, brother, fantastic. Brother, what about Blasians, half black, half Japanese chicks, brother? Are they deep in Japan? Is that heavy out there from what you see, brother?
Certain parts of Tokyo, I noticed them. Like there was a few. I was kind of surprised by it. It's actually really interesting. Like the last time I flew back to Vancouver, Canada, I left from Akihabara on a Friday night and went to the airport. And there was more black people in Akihabara than there was in downtown Vancouver. So yeah, there's a good amount of black people in terms of like mixed black and Japanese women. One thing I'll say is like certain parts of Tokyo, like Shibuya, for sure you'll see them. Akihabara, for sure you'll see them. And then some of the places that are more like residential parts of Tokyo, you'll see them as well. But they're not always just like half Japanese, half black. Like there's going to be half black, half Filipinos, or half black, half Indonesians. So there's going to be a mix of like the different Asian mix of black, those types of women all throughout Tokyo. But I've also seen them even outside of Tokyo. Like I've seen them in Ibaraki, I mentioned. I've seen them in Yokohama. I've seen them out in Tohoku, where I am. So obviously not like a majority by any stretch of the imagination, but if you're just out and about, you'll see them for sure.
Wow. And brother, do you see half Japanese, half black, or half whatever with black men in Japan?
Absolutely.
Let's go. Fantastic, brother. And brother, these good looking. So, brother, do you see black men with good looking Japanese women or half Japanese women in Japan?
Man, I remember the last time I was in Akihabara. It was late at night with my wife. We just went to a bookstore, and I literally back to back passed by a black man with a Japanese woman. Both times, smiling, giving them a nod. No, brothers are doing well out there. Like, it's one thing I find interesting. Like, almost every black man that I've seen is with like an average cute to bad Japanese woman when they're with a Japanese woman. It's really interesting to see. Like, when I compare the guys that come from America and they have their partner from America versus the guys that have their partners here, it's night and day. They are with absolute gorgeous women. They look super happy, laughing. You know, it's really nice to see.
Amazing, bro. Shout out to Black Muslim again for the support. Appreciate you, brother. Is there a place for entrepreneurs in Japan, or is it business in Japan, or is business in Japan just Japanese?
It is interesting. Like, I don't have too much experience with the startup community here, but I will say like a lot of it is kind of people who spent time in or left Silicon Valley and want to stay here. There is increasingly now kind of like between, I guess, foreigners coming here to do remote work, there is a bit of an entrepreneur community. They're different, like on Meetup, you can find them. But yeah, it's something that's not really super well established, I would say. Granted, there is a lot of English speaking stuff there, so you don't have to worry about a language barrier. It's funny. Like, when I think about the startup community in Japan, there are local investors who are well known. If you check like Crunchbase, you can find them. But like, being honest, like a lot of the time you'll run into Silicon Valley investors and it's like, you know how it is. They're coming from San Francisco to come to Japan to come cheat on their wife. And then they'll do business on the side. So yeah, you're going to run into a lot of people from primarily America who are here on business. It's not necessarily like a super well-established entrepreneur startup community, but there's resources here and you can get investment here.
Awesome, bro. Awesome. Wow, this has been a great stream so far. So brother, next question for you, right, is I got here. So in your life so far in Japan is white worshipping, brother. Big thing that people are concerned about it, particularly in China, South Korea, and Japan. I was in South Korea last year, and the white worshipping over there in South Korea is off the charts, bro. Yep. Oh my goodness. So in Japan, is that the same, like South Korea, when it comes to white worshipping, or is it an overstatement? Is it overblown? Break it down for us, bro.
It's definitely overstated because, like, South Korea is very unique, right? For a bunch of reasons historically and like how it is today. In Japan, so the first thing I'll say, like, I remember I was watching with my close friend a clip of Conan O'Brien, right? And he was in Shibuya and he was trying to interview people. And, you know, Conan O'Brien is like, he's like way past 6 feet tall, very skinny, ginger white dude. And there's this perception that people have that like Japanese women worship white men. The two Japanese girls he's interviewing in broad daylight ran away from him. You know, I've seen on YouTube like a lot of white men complain about like dating here. I think what people kind of get confused is like there's different narratives, and you have to understand like a lot of white people who come to Japan, it's their first time dealing with not being the main character or not being the top of the totem pole, so they kind of struggle to adjust, right? And then when they do have success, they think it's because people worship me because I'm white. It's like, no, sometimes you're just new and like exotic and people want to try something else. But people put Japanese stuff first. And then when it comes to the foreign stuff they like, it just depends. Because musically, it might be black music or Korean music. Fashion, it could be European fashion or something, you know, streetwear, whatever. But when it comes to like the core of life and what they value Japanese stuff more. Like a lot of times people just want to deal with like their culture, and Japanese culture works well. People are very fond of it. So there isn't this desire for the majority or the masses to throw away their culture. you can run into a girl who doesn't like Japanese culture, wants to be a misfit, and wants to live, she wants to speak French, but that's not the norm, right? So I don't really worry about white worship here. Japanese people tend to be very pragmatic, and even when there is cultural change, they tend to resist it for as long as they can. So yeah, that's not really a problem here. Like I lived in the Philippines almost 2 years. Like white worship in the Philippines is vastly worse than it is here. Here, it's not something that I worry about too much. And the other thing, if I'm being critical, brothers who follow this channel, educated or getting educated, focus on their careers. Sometimes the black guys that come to Japan and I see them in other YouTube videos, like we would bully them back home, right? For being weird or just like not fitting in well, just behaving poorly. So like white worshiping and like how that affects culture and how you're treated, I wouldn't even cross my mind. I would say that like there are certain things in black culture that are more appreciated in Japan than I would see in North America even. So people putting white people on a pedestal, meh. Again, like you might run into stuff once in a blue moon, but again, that's something you run into anywhere. And then the opposite happens too. Like I've seen Japanese people not too fond with the white people they're interacting with. So it is what it is, right?
Awesome. Good to hear. A great point in regards to when you said that white people are not the shocked that they're not the main character. Even in the West, right, when it's more where it's multicultural, so-called liberal, right? Somehow the white man gets all the best chicks of all races. In the UK, in America, in Canada, you were in the UK, bro, right? You saw, white dudes cleaning up. And some brothers feel like I'm capping when I say,
no, it's true, especially in London, it's bad.
Facts, bro. On Twitter, right, I wrote the other day, like, I see black men alone in the UK, but they're not alone, right? They're with low value looking women. And some dudes got angry on Twitter. And brothers, make sure you follow me on Twitter as well for updates on the channel and my thoughts, etc., right? And you're in the UK, brother, right? The white man gets all the best looking women, mixed race, Asian, East Asian, particularly Asian chicks. Oh my goodness, they love white dudes, right?
Like let's be realistic here, like because the UK especially has a culture of like it has its own culture, and then obviously there are tons of foreigners coming in to go to school and work. Well, let's be realistic. If a girl is Chinese, Korean, whatever, and she's coming to the UK, she's not looking for a black dude. She's coming to hook up with Harry Potter. Let's like, you know what I mean? In Thailand, when they were protesting like a year or two ago, like there were people doing Hunger Games salutes and stuff from Harry Potter. So it's just like people are coming for what they think British culture is. So they're not going to think twice about, like dating, a lot of times dating anyone who's not like a white British person. They want that white British experience that they think exists in their head, right? Even though nobody in London speaks like the Queen. Nonetheless, you're definitely right. You'll even see rich footballers, making millions of pounds per year, and the girls they're with will be questionable. Some of them get into legal problems because of the girls they're with, right? Look what happened, look what happened at Mason Greenwood, right? So yeah, like when I lived in the UK, it was almost about 3 years I lived there. I did notice that. I will say like every part of the UK is a bit different, but like for example, the South Asians, like the Pakistanis, the Indians, I even noticed the change in the short time that I was there, where it's like, whoa, okay, where like I think a lot of them, it's tough for them to step outside of the race because their family wants them to have a traditional wedding and religion and all these things that are understandable, right? But it's easier for them if they do step out the race to do so with a white person, right? Then you have to throw in, and this is the real killer, and I think a lot of brothers are not paying attention to this. There's been in The Economist, there's an article talking about how divided young men and young women are, because young men tend to skew conservative and women tend to be very liberal, right? So if you think about it, that means young women want these liberal values, whether it's feminism, gay rights, this, that, whatever. And a lot of young, especially black men, are known for being very conservative. Like there are things sexually that young women are going to be into that a lot of young black men aren't going to be comfortable with or ever like. And because these women want these things, they want this lifestyle, they're going to look at you and be like, oh, he's conservative. When I was in Europe, it was the first time where people were like asking me my political affiliation. Kyron, how Christian are you? Like, and it was obviously a woman, and I just had to stop and think to myself, like, oh, what they're saying is like, hey, you're black, and I think you're homophobic and you're misogynistic and all these things, which is silly because let's be real, like there are honor killings that South Asians do in the UK, right? Some of the women aren't allowed to go outside, but because they can get away with black people, they do it to us. And yeah, like definitely black men. Before it was like all this typical stuff why we're getting like, running into problems dating. But now you have to throw in the fact of like young women are very liberal and most young men, or a lot of young men, are very conservative, and black men are kind of seen as the face of a lot of times that conservative values, right? Especially when you look at red pill. So the women are going to look past you because they think that you're going to have incompatible values. It's funny, like, I see, like you live in the UK. I'm sure you know Muslims who drink and smoke,
yeah,
and have premarital sex, but that's completely against the rules of Islam, right?
Yeah.
But no one ever looks at them like that. It's just the black people. So, it's hard to deal with as a black man, but I think the best thing to do is just not subject yourself to it. Like, you shouldn't have to play all these optics games. And like, I remember when I was dating and like before I was like permanently abroad, I used to do something really interesting, which was when I would go on a date with a South Asian woman, I would dress like a Chicago drill rapper. And then when I would go on a date with an East Asian woman, I'd dress like Seinfeld. Because that's what they want. When an East Asian woman would ask me what's my favorite sport, tennis, I would never say basketball, tennis. In Japan, I don't have to do that. In the Philippines, I didn't have to do that. UAE didn't have to do that. So that's another beautiful thing, especially about in Japan, is like black men are very multifaceted. We're able to be ourselves here and like thrive here. In the UK and in America and Canada too, like there's a whole lot of weird, like subtle racism, subtle asking you to like whitewash yourself to fit in, that you just don't have to do here. You can just be yourself, which I appreciate.
There you go, brothers, man. There you go. Keeping it real as always, man. We don't lie on this channel. We keep it real, So next question for you, brother, right?
Yeah.
Is food. Okay.
Okay.
How is the food in Japan, brother? Is it food that the black man wants? Because brother, Kyron, right? We brothers, right? We black, bro. So we have a certain type of taste. Like we want that jerk chicken and rice and peas, or we want that collard greens or whatever, right? But
for sure,
but we're gonna be in Japan, right? So, brother, there's a food in Japan, right? Is it something that the black man can enjoy and eat, brother? Break it down for me, bro.
Oh my gosh, I have to tell you this one story. So there's a local Italian restaurant me and my wife go to, and obviously when you cook certain foods, they use different cooking oils and whatever. And they were trying, like, because we go there frequently, they're like trying different dishes because their son was studying cooking in Italy, and they had been, and they know different cuisines, and they prepared this dish for us. And the way the cooking oil was, it tasted so good, and it was very similar to like ackee and saltfish, like the famous Jamaican dish. So I was taken aback, and it tasted perfect. One time I was at a beach with a girl in Yokohama, and there was literally a Rasta from Jamaica cooking, believe it or not, jerk chicken at a festival right on the beach. So there's like a lot of foreign cuisine here in Japan. Like the best Italian food, the best Indian food I've had has been in Japan, whether it's like Japanese people or like immigrants cooking the food, and it's been exceptional, right? Then you want to talk about like the food that Japanese people eat on a day-to-day basis. It's funny, like when I go to 7-Eleven, because that's where people don't know, 7-Eleven convenience stores in Japan, it's not like in America or Canada where we just have junk. They have you can get dinner from 7-Eleven. You can get breakfast from there, like healthy food. The first thing is they're playing Motown soul music on the radio there, which is interesting. And then it's like I can get fresh fish, fresh baked goods. When I was this winter, they had coffee. It was Jamaican Blue Mountain coffee. And the food is just like super inoffensive. It's like, a slice of salmon, it cooked well, seasoned. You got some rice, miso soup. The food is Japanese food is not very in your face at all. And then if you're in Tokyo, especially, you want to have Western food. It's become a bit famous now on social media, but the best pizza places are in Tokyo. They're not in New York, not in Chicago. They're in Tokyo. So you think about stuff like that. Yeah, you know, the KFC here in Japan is a lot cleaner and nicer than it is elsewhere. I had it yesterday. It was chef's kiss. So whether it's like you're eating on the high end, the Japanese food or Western food, all of it is just better here. And the beef is just life changing, right? If you're really into beef, and you know, black men need to be careful, especially with cardiac problems, blood pressure, you name it. You want to eat really clean beef, and the beef here is amazing. That's the one thing I never think about is like, I just go to a restaurant, find out what I'm going to order it, and just eat. I don't have to think twice. It's always going to be good.
Wow, flipping heck, bro! Wow, incredible. So, brother, you know, obviously the whole the raw foods, you know, octopus,
Yeah.
you know, they eat some weird stuff there in Japan. I keep it real with you, brother, right? But are you also eating that yourself, brother, or are you avoiding those kind of foods that you know that brothers normally don't eat, brother? Brother, break it down.
So I don't like. My whole life, I've never ate pork, octopus. You know, wife is allergic to shrimp, but I don't eat shrimp either. So all that stuff I've never eaten. Period. But like, not for nothing, especially now at the yen is weak. I don't really see Japanese people eating that stuff frequently, anyways. Like shrimp, okay, but all that other stuff is like a delicacy. Go out once in a while, like it's there. They have a really deep culinary culture, right? So they prepare a ton of stuff. Like I got offered horse meat one time when I was eating in Shibuya at a restaurant.
What?
It was yeah.
Horse meat. Oh man.
I don't know why, but like a lot of Yakuza own establishments, that's like a thing for them. Go figure. But I just like, you know, I don't really eat that stuff because the fish and the beef are amazing. You don't need to do that. But if you want to, it's fine. But one thing I will say that you should eat is the raw vegetables because they're clean and there's so much vitamins and nutrients you're going to get from those raw vegetables, right? That's what I eat raw. But again, if you want them boiled, you can. You know, sometimes you get some grilled. It's not like food here is not something that I think twice about.
Okay, awesome, brother. Awesome. Now, brother, what about safety and Yakuza? Do Yakuza target foreigners out there? Are they deep out now in Japan, or do they still run Japan, brother? Break it down for me, bro.
It's so funny. The Yakuza are some of the nicest people I've ever met. If you're out late at night in Akihabara, and then definitely Shibuya, you will see them. Shinjuku as well. And it's like they're like a stereotype of themselves. They'll have like really nice suits. Some of them will have funky hair, and they'll be like trying to get you to go into their restaurants if it's like Japanese Yakuza, and you'll get really good service. You know, I don't recommend people go into Yakuza owned spots, but like they're around. But it's not like the mob in other countries, right? Like super polite, very welcoming of foreigners. Yeah, they're really nice. What you do have to watch out for though is if you're in specifically Roppongi, sometimes Shibuya, there will be these spots that are owned by Nigerians. So what the Yakuza will do is that, like, let's be real, like a 6'5" Black American dude is not going to be intimidated by the average Japanese man. Let's just be realistic. So what they will do is the Yakuza will, oh, you're like a Nigerian immigrant. Okay, cool. You need a visa to stay in Japan. We're going to get you a Japanese woman to marry. And what you'll do is you run these scam establishments for us. So like Japanese people, a lot of them are into like, you know, especially like 2000s hip hop. That's what the 90s, 2000s hip hop. So there'll be stores that'll sell like all the old clothing and they'll be charging exorbitant fees. So that's one thing. Don't fall for those scams. The other thing you'll see is like, you know, they'll have bars, and typically that's where like, you know, drink spiking can happen, or they'll just run up a big tab. And that's how the Yakuza gets people. It's not the Yakuza themselves. They'll go and get the Nigerians that are more intimidating because people are afraid. But that's correct. That's been cracked down so much. And, you know, a lot of the Nigerians here that are here still have their establishment still is like, you know, above board, right? Like good people. So I would be somewhat cautious, unfortunately, of that. But even now, especially as a man, like I wouldn't worry. I would say avoid the bars, like the bars that are ran by Nigerians. But yeah, for the most part, you don't have to worry about Yakuza or anything. I don't, when it comes to safety, I sometimes have to check myself that I am in Japan. I don't have to worry about stuff anymore. You know what I mean?
Awesome, bro. Awesome. All right, brother. Let me open up the phone lines, brother, and let's get some
Cool.
callers. And if you have any questions for you, brother, once again, brother, you let me know if you need to go or whatever. We're running
All
on your
good.
time, brother. Okay,
All good
awesome.
here. Yeah.
So if y'all want to call in, brothers, now's the time. Classic live stream, calling in about Japan, any questions about women, whatever. So while I wait for caller, brother, right? I want to ask you about the wife market in Japan in 2024.
Sure.
Um, is feminism, leftism taking over Japan and the woman's mentality, brother? Can we still find a wife there? Break it down for us, brother, in that aspect there, the feminist liberal agenda that's being pushed out all around the world.
Sure. I know like things have changed since 2018 to 2024. The whole world over has gotten a little bit funny, right? But one thing that I have to throw out there is what feminism and what liberal means in each country is not the same thing, right? So in Japan, like there are a lot of problems that do affect women, the things that are being changed that are serious, like sexual harassment, sometimes sexual violence, even things that none of us would ever want to happen to any woman. So genuine reasons for a woman to like protest and fight for their rights, right? For real abuse, not just to like, superiority, like they're being abused, they need help. But on the flip side, a lot of us grew up with single moms, right? So imagine like I think about if my mom lived here. Well, rent is $200, easy to get a job, work at a convenience store, and her kids are going to a safe school and getting fed and coming home to a safe environment. So even though things are not necessarily equal for Japanese women, a lot of Japanese women like it like that. Because if you look at what's happening in the West, I'll be honest, I speak to a lot of young women in the West and they tell me, yeah, feminism sucks because we got into the workplace, but now we can't afford anything. And there's double the competition for homes and jobs because we're all competing, plus globalism. And cool, I went to school, I got my degree, I make 50K, my rent is 2,500 a month, I have student loan debt, and I'm depressed and on antidepressants. Right? Versus if these things wouldn't have happened, they would have a husband going to work and taking care of them. And a lot of them where it's like, well, they used to worry about getting into these relationships, having to depend on a man, being abused. Now they realized, wait a minute, I'm on my own, I'm self-sufficient, but I'm barely struggling to get by and I'm still not happy. Right? So there is this kind of like reevaluation of from I hear from a lot of women of what they want, like a balance between these things. And in Japan, the thing is, women, because there's part-time jobs, it's not like women had to work, extenuous hours. Like they could just work short hours, right? So yeah, a woman will work part-time job, chill out, have a decent life, or they would be a stay-at-home mom. Their husband works long hours, they're with the kids. It's kind of easy, and I think that because of how good Japan has been, yes, there's always going to be outside influences, and young people are going to be stupid. But a lot of people are just happy with the way things are. They might complain about working hours and like some tough cultural stuff, but otherwise they're fine. So I don't find there's like this strong resentment. Like with Korean women, it's very different, right? I don't find there's a strong resentment of Japanese women towards Japanese men here. And that's something you don't have to worry about. Feminism in the West, a lot of times it's almost used in a weirdly racist way against black men. Not a thing in Japan. And in terms of finding a wife, it depends on what you want. If you want a girl who is, a lot of guys that I know that are young want like kind of the tradcon wife, right? The virgin wife who's very conservative, quiet, just focusing on her stuff, has like a nurturing type of womanly stereotypical career. You can find that in Japan. I would say maybe if you're looking for that, Tokyo might not be the place because it's so busy. It's so, very anonymous. But if you're looking for something different, you can get that in Tokyo. But if you want a virgin wife or you want a wife who's experienced, so to speak, you can get them easily here in Japan because dating is such like a normal thing to do. You just kind of, got to learn the different social cues, like how people interact with each other and just kind of get used to things. But it's super easy to find what you want. And feminism is not ruining Japan. People always in the West talk about how sexist Japan is. The governor of Tokyo is a woman. I mean, people, honestly, it's just like, call a spade a spade. It's white imperialism, right? They talk about how sexist Asia is. One of the political leaders of Singapore who just stepped down recently was a woman. And Singapore is a very strict conservative country, right? Philippines has had 1 or 2 women leaders, and so has Korea. So we haven't had a woman president in the US. and we only had one in Canada. So there's this perception that women need to be saved and feminism, this, that. And I did see a lot of feminism and like self-destructive feminism, I would say, in the Philippines, but I've seen none of that in Japan. And when you see stuff in Japan, you can't contextualize it through a Western lens. You have to look at it through the lens of Japan. It's very unique. Stuff that you might say, oh, that's feminism taking over. It's like they might have been like that in Japan way before people even had the word feminism. So you just have to kind of approach things differently. But in terms of feminism as we know it and facing it in Japan, no way. Not happening.
Awesome, bro. I need a virgin man, virgin chick, virgin woman. Just need that.
If you're religious, you're looking for a virgin wife. If that's the type of person you are, you will absolutely find one here, because there are Japanese women that just like their hobby. They like their hobby and they're waiting for a nice man to be their husband. And it's very interesting because what you'll find is Japanese women, when you date them, they give you gifts. They're not waiting for you to pamper them and shower them. They're giving you stuff. Damn. On Valentine's Day, the men get gifts. So, it's a really easy place to date. I wouldn't think twice about it. If you're trying to get married, come to Japan.
Wow. So, brother, in terms of what's it called now? Religion, right? Over Japan, it's atheist/Buddhist society. If you're a Christian brother coming to Japan, right? Would a woman, can you get her to convert to Christianity, or can it work with her being, a Buddhist or an atheist? That's the part where a lot of brothers are, Karen, a lot of brothers believe in a higher power, believe in God. And it's a lot more easier if a woman you're dealing with also believes in God and is a Christian brother. Would there be problems if you wife up a chick that's not Christian in Japan?
No, Japanese people are not very when it comes to culture, there's hardline stances about this is how we operate, right? Religion, I guess because Japanese history has never been I'm talking about Christianity, Islam, no, that's never been a real problem here. Japanese people tend to be very open-minded. What I would say though is if you are very religious, especially if you're Christian, there are churches here, right? Regular Christian churches, and that's a good place to go and meet your wife if you want to get around that problem. The other thing, not for nothing, is that there are if you're Muslim, there's a lot of Indonesians and Malays here. And if you're Christian, again, there's lots of Filipinos here who are Christian Catholic. So it's kind of not a problem, right? There are Japanese women who are going to be open to dating someone of any faith and will convert for you. I've heard from Japanese women that they converted when they married their husbands. Some just kind of make it work. And then other men just, oh, I'm Christian. I married a Filipino woman. I'm Muslim. I married a Malay woman. It's really not an issue at all here.
Awesome, bro. Awesome. Yo, Kyron, right?
Yes.
Now, this might be crazy, brother, but, I want to get, brother, 1 million black men over to Japan by the end of 2025 to live in Japan and wife up 1 million Japanese women, brother. Can we get 1 million black men, brother, from the West to Japan by the end of next year, brother? Is that something that we should be aiming for? 1 million black men? 1 million black men?
Nope. You know what our job is? To gatekeep. You have an audience of really good people, black men that are respectable, that want good things and carry themselves well. We should take all the well-to-do ones of us and travel to places like Japan, the UAE, Singapore, the Philippines, Latin America, Africa. Take the good ones of us and place ourselves in places almost like PR, right? When I go to the Philippines, people have an interest in black culture. It's because of LeBron and Steph Curry, right? They're walking PR firms for black people. And I think we need to take that mentality. So somebody like you, somebody like Theo, other black men who do well for themselves, Tokyo, Seoul, drop us in these different places and let's represent ourselves well. I don't want to bring 1 million people because we're going to have to lower the bar. And I don't believe in that type of inclusion. I don't want that. Let the bums be bums, stay where they are. And the cream of the crop, the people who are trying to elevate, those are the people we want to put in good positions and drop them in and help them succeed and let them represent us. Not the bums in Toronto that are trying to act like they're best friends with Drake and talk and slang and do all sorts of stupid crap. The ones of us who carry ourselves well and will make our children's lives easier. That's what we want.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. So I got a caller, brother.
Sure.
Jam, can you turn your camera on in the background so I know you're not a troll, please? And you are, brother. Yes, you are indeed a brother. Thank you, JM. You are confirmed. Camera off, please. Camera off. Awesome. Let me bring in JM in the background. Long time no speak, brother. Hope you're well. What's going on, Jam?
Always well, brother. Always well. Um, yeah, I have a few questions just regarding to the whole Japan situation. The first question that I have, right, and I asked this the last time when you had another Japanese person on the stream, but the build, right? Uh, I'm a pretty big guy, right? And I heard that they like more of the sleek, slender, like the Korean look, right? Not the
Yeah,
bodybuilder Chinese look, right?
sure.
Yeah. So, is that true? And if so, you think I should slim down?
Honestly, it depends. You're totally right, but there's some nuance to it. So what I found is throughout Asia, the Gen Z women really like that Korean build, Korean look, where it's kind of like slim, borderline androgynous. The older women want none of that. They want, if you're a big dude, whether it's muscular or just fat, they want the bigger guy, especially as a foreign dude. So, and the funny thing I would say, honestly, is the women I find that are like 35 to 45, even 50 in Japan, those are the ones that look the best and built the best. So, yeah, like the 19 to 22-year-old might be off put, even though you probably will still get some of them. But the women who are older that look way better, and even some in their late 20s, will definitely prefer you. So I wouldn't even bother slimming down.
Can I ask, hold on, can I ask one question? Brother, in terms of let's say so would you say Gen Z women, right? Because
Mhm.
women who are 20, 21, 22 are Gen Z, and a lot of
Yes.
us are targeting that age range. So, brother, would you say if you're a foreigner, right, and you're jacked, right, and you got
Mhm.
muscles, you're quite big, right, Gen Z women will make a pass for you because you're a foreigner, whereas for a Japanese guy, they want him to be obviously slim, that K-pop looking feminine, awful look. Is that what you're saying, bro?
Yeah, you see, that's a good point. Like the rules are different for foreigners than locals because not for nothing, if you're a foreigner, you don't look like the norm anyways, right? Um, Something even as simple as like facial hair. Japanese women don't like Japanese men typically with facial hair, but as a foreigner, you get away with it, right? And they might like, oh, this is different. Something just to keep in mind is like there's a level of exoticism, right? It's still like 90% Japanese people here. So yeah, for the average Japanese dude, they want the more K-pop build, and that is what it is. But I would say like outside of Gen Z, no, you know, you will see kind of a wide variety of Japanese men. Like I'm out in the countryside, and like some of the it's funny, the ex Yakuza guys who ran out the city and are in the countryside, they're huge. Some of them are over 6 feet tall. They're big, burly dudes, and their wives are pretty small, right? So that's not something I would ever worry about. And like I said, even if they prefer something, that doesn't mean that you can't still win. With minimal effort, I should put in as well. So yeah, when it comes to build, especially as a black man from the West, don't even think twice about it. Just have good hygiene is all they care about.
Awesome. So fire away, Jam. I'll be away for around 5 minutes.
All right. Yeah. No, I mean, that's pretty much the intel that I got already. So you kind of confirmed that, but
Cool.
I do want the Gen Z younger women. You know, what I mean, if we're talking about the older
Yeah,
women for fun per se, then sure. But I'm kind of well, let me not say I'm past that, but that's not necessarily what I'd be looking for. I'd be looking for someone to kind of commit to. But I did want to talk to you about the Malaysian women, right, and the
yes,
Muslims. Right? Now,
sure,
I'm not religious,
okay,
but I do see the need for religion in society the older I get. So I do see myself
yeah,
converting to
absolutely,
Islam in the future, even if I don't
okay,
actually believe it. Right?
sure,
I do see myself
mhm.
converting, and I want my wife, right, to adhere to the faith and to actually believe it and adhere to it.
Yes.
The Muslim Malay women that you saw in Japan, do they adhere to it? Like, do they wear the hijab, or are they actually like really religious, or are they just kind of like you wouldn't know unless they told you?
Put it like this: I'm in the middle of nowhere, and I see Malay and Indonesian women wearing hijabs out here still. It's actually really impressive. Like Japan, yes, like Japan has a very kind of like set in stone culture, but there is room for people to kind of be themselves, and there's respect for other faiths. And I do see like people not just from like Malaysia and Indonesia, but also the Middle East come here and continue to practice their faith. So if you're looking for like a traditional Muslim woman, it's actually funny, like the fact that you are considering converting to Islam, they would be overjoyed with. They would want to teach you that and want their family to teach you that. So, yeah, I think you'll find it actually a really good thing if you're looking to convert to come here and find those women, and they're easy to track down as well. So yeah, definitely if you're looking at converting and that's something you're serious about, dating Muslim women in Japan, ironically, is pretty easy.
That's splendid to hear. The other question I had, you might not be able to answer this, but it's worth a shot. Is the pets, or the pet culture, right, in Japan? Now,
yeah.
You fire away.
So, do you have a dog that you want to bring with you?
Yeah, I do, and so I know that this. I mean, it's already a whole hassle to bring this dog. I mean, I had a hassle bringing my dog over to Brazil. I just moved from from Miami to Brazil now a couple months
Nice.
ago, and I want to kind of like go back and forth between Japan, Brazil, and maybe another country for tax purposes, right? So the last time I was on the channel, someone mentioned I was giving bad advice. I wasn't giving bad advice. It's just for me, I have not been in Brazil over 6 months yet, so I don't have to pay tax.
Well, 180 or 182 day rule, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, if you stay less than that time, you don't pay tax. And I haven't stayed over that. So I was reading the comments, and everyone's like, "Oh, he's giving back." No, I'm talking about my situation, right? Obviously, you do your research, but yeah, for that, I want to go to other places. Japan is actually one of those places, but it requires 200 plus odd days in order to clear your dog if you don't want to do quarantine. So that's already the first hurdle. But then the second hurdle I heard is that it's very hard to find apartments, right, that will accept dogs as a foreigner. Do you know anything about that?
In Tokyo, it's definitely going to be tough. There are agencies like Oak House and Sakura House that specialize in helping foreigners rent, and some of the places are pet friendly. But honestly, if you want to get around that, just rent a house in the countryside. You know what I mean? Like these places are very undersubscribed. And like, especially if we're talking like the rent is a couple $100 a month and you can pay the lease all in one pop, they'll tend to be pretty flexible. But yes, there are going to be places where bringing a dog, it might be like off limits. You know, getting like a fish or something is typically fine. But at the end of the day, there's going to be a place that you can find that will allow you to have a pet. But the quarantine thing, if you're traveling between countries, yeah, it'll be a pain.
Yeah, I'm thinking maybe I might just have to leave my dog in Brazil while I'm going there, but it won't allow me to go as long as I would like to go. Like I'd want to spend at least 3 months there, but without my dog, I'd have to spend considerably less amount of time. But I guess there's really no ways around that. Okay, the next question that I have, right, is pertaining to the food, right? Now I'm a strict vegetarian, right? So strict. Is the food accommodating towards foreigners? You can't trust everything you read, right? Like for example, when I was also in the Philippines as well, and when I Googled being vegan in the Philippines, they said it's a no-go, it's terrible. But the Philippines, from all the countries I've been to, have the best vegan cuisine by far. Like I'll literally go back just for food. So I kind of wanted to know, how is Japan like in terms of like catering to strict vegetarians, like those who don't eat meat, eggs, fish, any of that stuff?
That's an interesting question. So I would say like it depends on kind of how you structure your diet, because you could just have like, for example, like every morning I have like just miso soup, some mixed veggies, some rice. So there's stuff that you can get here, but it's definitely not catering to vegetarians. However, within Tokyo, there are so many restaurants that cater to just everybody. There's Jamaican food restaurants, there's everything there. So if you're looking for vegetarian spots, especially vegetarian or vegan, like around Harajuku, you'll find stuff like that. Just expect to pay more and then less availability. And then maybe, you know, if you're in the countryside, you're not going to run into that. But yeah, if you're stationed in Tokyo, you'll be fine. You'll be able to run into lots of stuff like that. And then in terms of groceries, getting fresh vegetables is super easy. The only thing that tends to be expensive is some imported fruit, but even that I'm finding is much cheaper than it used to be. So you'll be fine, I think.
Okay, and then the next question I have, I'm sorry to rapid fire, but I'm just trying to get these done as quickly as possible. The next question I have, right, is pertaining to where do you meet, right, the solid women? And I know it's easy to meet women from Japan. I know you can just talk to them, whatever, but I don't speak any Japanese. I mentioned this before. I tried learning for a month. The only word I remember is watashi, which is I for female, something like that. You know what I mean? It's actually a very difficult language to learn. If you want to get any type of proficient in Japanese, you're gonna have to spend years learning it, and it was very disheartening for me because I didn't see myself making much progress after spending so many hours studying. But I know you said that you don't really need much Japanese proficiency, and don't be afraid to use a translator. But especially after coming to Brazil the second time, learning Portuguese,
Right.
I see the difference, right, when you know the language versus when you don't, and it was a completely different perspective now that I'm here and I can actually converse, right, in the language. So you said you first came to Japan and you didn't know any Japanese, right? I'm assuming your Japanese has gotten a lot better since then. Have you noticed a difference, right, once you started becoming more proficient in the language?
Honestly, my Japanese hasn't gotten much better. I've been so focused, like keeping up on like what's changing in Microsoft Cloud, that I've not had time to learn the language. And it's still been fine because, the thing I'll find interesting about Japan is like, it's not that they don't know English; they're not confident in their English skills, right? But having basic conversations with anybody here is pretty easy. And then in terms of meeting women, yeah, definitely knowing Japanese makes a big difference. But it depends on where you are. Like, for example, I'm in the middle of nowhere. Like, the amount of people that are fluent in English is going to be much lower than Tokyo. But like, if I'm out, for example, on a Friday night in Shibuya or Shinjuku, I could meet a Japanese woman who speaks fluent English, because a lot of them, especially these days, have like maybe studied abroad or like took an English language course. So, it kind of depends on how much you're willing to deal with that language barrier. But yeah, learning Japanese definitely makes a big difference. But for me, when I was here and I was single, I barely knew any. It was totally fine. Meeting a girl at a bar and then pulling out your phone and talking to her using Google Translate was like a game. So it's not so bad.
All right, hold on there, Jam. So, brother, question for you, Kyron. So, obviously, you're remote working in Japan, right? Earning Canadian dollars. I'm assuming working for a Canadian company. Where do you pay tax? Do you pay tax in Canada or pay tax in Japan, brother?
Unfortunately, Canada is a little bit higher. So yeah.
Interesting. So you don't pay taxes in both Canada and Japan, even though you're living in Japan?
No. So Americans a little bit different because they pay taxes on their worldwide income. They have FATCA and FBAR. That's unique for Americans. Everybody else, and granted, there's like income thresholds and things get a little bit complicated. But essentially, if you're just talking about your salary, tax that source, and there are tax treaties, right? So Canada has a very complex tax treaty with Japan. The UK also has one. The thing to note is like, it depends on your rules of residence, though. So depending on the visa you're on, you might not be able to legally work remote. But it depends, because, like, for example, there are people here who come on like dependent visas, and then they ask the local immigration authority, can I work remote? And they say it's fine. So it's really something that you need to talk to the immigration officers about and plan around your visas. However, there's also still like a lot of people I know didn't even bother. It's kind of like don't ask, don't tell, because no one's going to come to your door. Hey, are you working remote? It's ridiculous. Just don't send the money to a Japanese bank account and you're fine. But I'm employed by a Canadian company. I'm a full-time employee, so I'm getting taxed at source. If I was a contractor, I'd probably have to move differently. But as a full-time employee of a Canadian company, yeah, it's not a problem at all.
So, brother, so you're getting paid in your Canadian bank account. You have your Canadian debit card, right?
Yes.
And you're using your Canadian debit card all over the country.
Yeah, I should mention. So when I first came in 2018, that would not have flown, because other than the like convenience stores, using my foreign card was just not going to work. Now, yes, if you're going to an ATM, you want to go to a 7-Eleven, a Lawson, or a Family Mart. But in stores, I can just use Apple Pay now, and it works fine. It works better than it did even in Canada sometimes. So I still have UK bank accounts, and I still have my Canadian bank account, and Apple Pay works fine. Sometimes I just use the chip and pin, and that works fine as well. The pro tip I would say is that if you try to use your debit card and you try to select your checking account and it gives you like a problem, try again. Instead of clicking like debit, where it's like checking, savings, click credit, even if it's a debit card, and that will just tend to make it work. So yeah, my foreign card here works totally fine. It's actually been a breeze.
Wow. And you also have a Japanese account as well, right? Bank account.
Yeah, I do. That's another thing. If you move here as a foreigner, opening a bank account can be overwhelming because all the paperwork and all that. Don't do that. Don't go to a traditional Japanese bank. If you're wealthy and you come here, you might be able to have your bank open you an account while you're abroad if it's like one of those multinational banks. But you have a couple of options if you're American. So there's Revolut and there's Wise, which used to be TransferWise, right? So you can open Japanese bank accounts with either of them, and sending money to different countries is super easy. Everybody listening should have a bank account with Revolut and one with Wise. It makes life easier in every country. The other thing that you can do in Japan, believe it or not, is Sony is a bank, and they have a great English support and an English website, and you can just order, register online in English, order your bank card, will come to you, and you can do your banking through Sony. Go figure. You can even get a PlayStation branded debit card if you want.
Bro, this is your all-time classic stream, man. This is why I do this, man. Appreciate you, Karen, for dropping that game. Hold on there, Jem. Shout out to Mr. Chow Khan for the support. Appreciate you, Chow Khan. The only time I disagree with you, with you, no passport, is when you posted Toronto is good for passport bros. I live here in Canada, and it's trash. The day is extremely hard now. So basically, right, I bring on people from different perspectives, right? Next month, right, I might bring on a brother, right, who says that Toronto, Canada is great for black men. Okay, this is why I'm the best passport bros channel. I'm not here to lie to you. I'm not here to sell dreams to you. I will get the good, the bad, and the ugly. I love getting different perspectives on this channel. Okay, so it makes you think, and you go ahead and make your own personal decision. Okay, now next month, if a guy says Toronto is great for black men, I'll bring him on. In December, if a brother comes in and says that, oh, Toronto's horrible for black men, I'll bring him on too. Okay, I bring on different perspectives. So yeah, brother, that's your personal choice, brother. And brother, if you want to come on the channel, brother, and speak about, of course, come on, bro.
So Shao Kahn, and by the way, great name. I love Mortal Kombat. So like, here's the thing. You're totally right, but you have to consider, like, black men, we are not a monolith, right? There are, like, we come in so many shapes and forms. We look different, behave different interests. So I'll give a great example. Removing the race and dating thing for a second, out of everywhere in North America, the two places with the worst earnings for IT workers is Toronto and Vancouver. It's the lowest in the continent, right? So if you're a black guy and you work in IT, you're probably going to hate it no matter what, and you're not going to get the most value out of it because you're not getting the most value for dollar already, right? But if you're a black guy and you live in Toronto and you work in marketing, and Toronto is one of the most foremost marketing-focused cities on the planet, you might have a different perspective. So while I agree with you that, like, Canada in general, you should skip it, depending on who you are as a black man, you might have a totally different experience. And the other thing I have to add that's a big asterisk is that IP has a British accent, right? So he brings that British accent to Vancouver, Toronto. It's a different conversation than some guy like you or me who grew up in the city. They're judging you for what school you went to and all that crap. Or what it's like during Caravana festival season when the guys come from typically like Michigan, New York, and they're partying. They're exotic to the women there, right? So you do have to consider that for us, 100% would rather not be like, I would rather just do nothing than date in Toronto or Canada as a whole. But for other people with different backgrounds and different stuff, especially maybe if they're older, a little bit more financially established, it might have a different perspective. So that's one thing to keep in mind is, like, I totally agree in general, but certain men, certain backgrounds will have a different experience than we will.
Facts. I'm assuming that Pookie and Reyes would do on Toronto amongst stereotypical women who have a particular image of black men sagging their pants, smoking like green.
You'd be surprised. Like,
no?
Yeah, like it's weird. Like it's a specific Pookie and Ray. Like the stereotypical one will be an incel on the internet, angry, right, and unemployed and struggling and getting nothing. But there's a specific type that, like, this kind of Toronto youth culture crap will unfortunately can do decently well, right? I could show you the clip after. There's a famous clip in Toronto where an Asian woman is doing an interview. And she's basically saying, if you're a black man, if you're not rapping or trapping, you're a failure, you're whack. Like, I don't want to talk to you. And she's Asian. So, that does exist, but there's like nuance to it. It's not as like cut and dry like it is in America. Because another thing I could say is, like, a lot of nerdy black men in Toronto are going to get looked over, and then there's a demographic of nerdy black men that are going to get a ton of attention, female attention from women. So just, that's the thing about, I think, for everybody listening, specifically about Toronto, it's so nuanced and layered that it's very hard to explain even in a 2-3 hour stream, where what Shao Kahn said makes sense, but why it makes sense, you have to really unpack. And again, it doesn't apply to everybody, because you also have to think about it like this. A ton of African immigrants are going to move to Toronto and they're already going to be married. Same thing with Caribbean immigrants, right? My grandfather moved to Toronto in the 70s and was already married. So how that affects how you date and how you work, it's complicated. But yeah, like some Pookie and railways will do well, but not all of them.
Awesome. Thank you, bro. Shout out to Shao again for the support. There'll be more content on the Patreon. Okay, more content coming on the Patreon coming very, very soon. I dropped 2 this week, and there'll be more coming next week. Shout out to Mr. Black Muslim for the support. On my feed, I'm seeing a lot of videos about Islam growing in Japan from a perspective. Brother, is that, from what you see, brother Kyron, is that true from what you saw in Japan?
I wouldn't say that I necessarily have seen it grow, but I will see I've seen more people, because Japanese people's perspective around immigration is like 2 things. So highly educated, highly skilled people from the West will take them, right? And then for labor jobs or skilled jobs, we will take people from nearby countries, right? Because they want similar cultural values. They don't want somebody from Africa or the Middle East. They typically will want people from nearby countries so they can integrate well. If it's just like a labor job, for skilled work, anybody's welcome. So you are seeing, especially now, because again, like, globalism, things have changed. A lot of countries are not messing with China anymore. A lot of countries have moved all their business out of Russia. Some stuff is coming onshore, coming to countries that are allied, like Japan. There's a new semiconductor factory being built in Japan, and a lot of the workers are from Indonesia and Malaysia. So you will see like a growing population of people who are Muslim, and then there's one part of Japan where there's a fair bit of people who are Kurdish. So it's not that Islam is spreading to Japanese people as much as the population of people who practice Islam is growing.
Do you see Japanese people that are Muslim, brother, in Japan?
I haven't ran into more than 2 so far. So granted, I've not asked, right? And Japanese people tend to be subtle, but yeah.
Awesome, bro. Awesome. All right, Jam, we're gonna have to head off here very soon. We're at 3 hours here. It's getting late over there in Japan, I know for a fact. I'm getting a bit tired. Jam, do you have any closing questions or statements?
Yeah, I guess one last one, right? You said you work in Canada, all right? So I'm assuming you're working in Canada time frame, right? So are you working at nights over there in Japan? And how has that been treating you?
It's so funny. I'll be honest. So the first thing, it was tough because different stuff outside of work happens at different time zones, right? So for example, if I want to stay up and watch a UFC match, I have to stay up super, super late to accommodate for that. Once I figured out that, hey, if my schedule is this time Monday through Friday and I want to maintain throughout the week, I need to make sure that I maintain it on the weekends. That helped a lot. The other thing that I know employers complain sometimes about taxation and other stuff, they don't really care, just them yapping. The benefit though is I do have colleagues that are in Asia, other teams that interact with sometimes, they're in this part of the world and then some are in Europe, right? So it's, for example, when people are asleep in New York, I'll be awake and London will be awake. So it's easier to interact. So it can be difficult interacting, especially with people in California, because it's like a 16-hour time zone difference. But, Eastern time is like, depending on daylight savings, 12, 13 hours is not so bad. And it just depends on who you are, because for me, ironically, it works well because I finish work and go to sleep when my wife is at work. So I'm asleep and she's at work and she comes home and then I'm getting up and then she's up. So it's not so bad. And then we have the weekends together. So for me, it's been working out pretty decently.
Awesome. Go on, Jam.
No, I was just going to say awesome. Thank you. I'll drop off.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jam.
Good talking to
Appreciate you, brother. Hope it's going well for you in Brazil. Okay, Mr. Kyron, classic live stream, brother. I want to say a huge thank you, brother, for the time you've taken out here to drop some gems for brothers, brother.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, no problem, bro. No problem. I would say one last question from you, brother, is in regards to the cheating culture. Pardon me, sorry, cheating culture in Japan, brother. It's been big news over the past several weeks or months.
Yes.
From what you see, brother, is that true? Is there a huge cheating culture there? How can black women avoid that? What kind of women cheat out there in Japan? Give us a game, brother.
I think in terms of media and like London, like people talk about London like the UK is only one city, right? Like they will talk about if this happens in London, the whole UK is like that. And you know that's not true. Like Edinburgh and London could not be more different, right? Japan kind of has the same thing where like people talk about Tokyo like it's all of Japan. I live in a small like countryside rural city place. Do you think you could run around as a Japanese person cheating and not be called out and not be caught for it?
Nope.
Nah, not happening, right? Now, Tokyo, where there's 30, 40 million people, it's a lot easier for no one to notice you doing that, right? So, yes, in Tokyo, there is a culture of cheating and things are a lot more anonymous, but let's break it down, right? Like Japanese men, and it's changing, like work culture is changing, but a woman's a woman. You leave her alone and you're gone for 8 hours a week and you come home and you sleep. Woman has needs too. She's an adult, right? Things are bound to happen. That's one part of it. The second part of it is that a lot of people in Japan do not consider casual sex cheating. So you might marry a Japanese woman, and if you go and you hook up with some girl, she might be totally fine with it. She might not want to know, but she's totally fine. The way they see cheating, a lot of Japanese women is, oh, you have a woman friend? You have like an emotional bond with her? That's cheating. So they differentiate and describe cheating differently. But I would say if you're super worried about cheating, you shouldn't be, because that's just not something where like, if you're choosing your woman wisely, you don't have that problem, right? And I don't think the men listening are going to be the type foreigners, kind of Gaijin privilege, right? We might work like 45 hours in a week. You're not going to typically work ridiculous overtime. So you're not going to be away from your wife all the time, not able to come home and spend time with her and please her. And yeah, like I said, if you're super worried about cheating culture, just don't date a woman from Tokyo where there's 82 love hotels everywhere, right? Let's go out to somewhere a little bit more quiet.
Awesome, bro. But she won't be. So obviously, you mentioned that she doesn't care if you might smash someone, but as long as there's no emotional bond, right? Is that how the men think as well? So she might smash the dude, but he's thinking if there's no emotional bond there, it's not cheating. Is that how they think that they're the dudes as well? Damn.
I don't know how to describe it the other way around, because this is the thing. You know how women are. A married woman that steps out of a relationship. This is good things end of stream. I'll say this two things. A married woman who steps out of a relationship in Japan, sometimes they might be looking for an affair. I'm talking specifically about Tokyo, an affair. And pardon me. The other thing you will see a lot on Tinder, if you set your age bracket to a certain point, you will see married Japanese women with photos of their wedding ring on Tinder in like Tokyo or Osaka. So, some of them are just looking for casual stuff. Some of them are looking for a real relationship, but that is like very much the big cities. You're not going to find that outside of the big cities.
Awesome. Kyron, thank you, brother. Do you have any closing statements, brother, before we let you go?
Yeah, one thing other than, again, thank you for having me on. For everybody listening in Canada, America, and the UK, you are living in hell. What you think is normal and okay, it's not that bad. It's that bad, I promise. I've been to 15 countries so far, lived in about 5. However bad you think it's not, trust me, it's terrible. The UK is about to go through an election, and the shift from a right-wing government for the last 14 years to a liberal one, there's lots of stuff in the UK that's super conservative in society that would not fly in America and would not fly in Canada. You Brits are going to have to deal with that stuff now. It's a perfect time to leave the UK before the cultural shift happens, and it's going to be rough. And you already know that left side is not really like us. In America, I mean, it's rhetorical. The demographics of the country is changing. You guys have an election coming up. It's going to get ugly no matter who wins. And America's been on the decline for a long time. You should leave too. And in Canada, there's a million things we could talk about. But the most important thing is you don't have any money, you're screwed. And look at Canada's economy. The unemployment rate in Canada is more than double that of Japan's. So what do you think? Like a country like Canada where a million immigrants a year comes in, it's going to help the employment rate? No. All three of these countries are in terrible, terrible shape. The best thing you could do is leave, take a valuable skill with you and leave. And just like the brother who was on before, where he's looking to split his life in different countries, he talked about living in different countries for tax purposes. The 180-day rule thing that exists, right? If you look up Nomad Capitalist or some of these other sites, Shakira got sued by the Spanish government for staying longer than 180 days and not paying taxes. It's a real thing. So between reducing your taxes and then just having more freedom, you should look at different residence permits. Come to a place like Japan, make that your base, get comfortable here, integrate with society, find love, have fun, build your career, and then keep a backup. Brazil's a great backup. The Middle East is a great backup. Some parts of Europe are still good. Get a good base outside of the West, get a backup option somewhere else, maybe even two, and then you'll feel a lot better. What's going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years in the West? If you just forget, don't take my word for it, look at the past 4 to 5 years in Canada, the UK, and the USA, and you tell me if things have gotten better or worse. Why would you stay? Stop hoping the government saves you, take action, and leave. That's what I gotta say.
Facts, bro. Absolute facts, man. And how do you take action, brothers? IT. Okay. Get into IT. I'll be teaching Python again in July 2024. Sign-ups will open at the beginning of July. I hope you brothers sign up there to IT. Make sure you take Theo's cloud course. Okay. Pardon me. Make sure you join my Patreon for upcoming financial intel. I dropped one last week, okay, and I was right, okay. So go and join the Patreon right now, okay. I'll be giving you brothers financial intel, right? That I do my research. Brothers that I know I speak to can verify the research too. So make sure you join the Patreon, man, okay, for not only financial intel, but also travel intel too as to how freaky women are in the bedroom. You want to know how Japanese women are in the bedroom, how freaky they are? Check out the Patreon, man. Another point I want to make is that, brothers, again, remote work, IT, freedom, okay? Stocks, crypto, all right? Stocks, crypto. We're not even in the bull run yet for crypto, okay? And we're seeing a coin like Jasmy coin that I told brothers about back in January or February, okay? And I brought a brother on to speak about it as well. It has 4x'd, right, since then. And we're not even in the bull run. That's how lives get changed, brothers, okay? That's how lives get changed, brothers. So the goal is get into IT and an IT salary, okay? Remote working, put that savings, put the extra cash into crypto stocks, right? Funds, index funds, ETFs. Start thinking long term, start thinking short term, okay? Start building wealth, start thinking strategically, start traveling, start having that global citizen mindset. So if you're serious here, right, you can book an IT consultation with me via the kind link in regards to planning your IT career. Okay, you make sure you join the Patreon too for financial intel. You get taught Python by me. You're setting yourself for a great success. Okay. Aside from that, make sure you go and follow the Reddit page. Okay, Passport Bros on top. That is the official international passport Reddit page. Post on there, RP content, traveling. Go and follow the Reddit page. Okay. You can also follow me on the global, on the public, okay, Discord server, okay, and we got over 200 people there on the Discord server, chopping up about traveling, about the current state of the West. I'll post a link in a bit. Give me a second, but you gotta make sure, right, you join the Discord, man. Be a part of the community and free yourself from the shackles of the West, okay? Now, here's a link to my Twitch page. If you're on Twitch, go and follow me on Twitch. If you're on Rumble, follow me on Rumble too, okay? That's the backup channel. That's where I'll be posting content that I can't really post on YouTube. So go and follow me on Rumble, okay? Rumble Twitch. I'm also on Kick too. I'm also on Facebook. In fact, I'll make it easy for you. I'll post my link tree. So here's a link to my link tree. Okay. And go and follow every platform I'm on: Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, right? The movement is going global. Pardon me. Keep in touch with me and follow what I'm doing, okay? Ain't no game out here, brothers. Go and follow me on the link tree. And of course, let me post the Discord server for y'all, brothers, okay? Here's a public Discord server, okay? So chop it up with us. You know, last week I did a voice call with brothers on the Discord, chopping about crypto, IT, traveling, woman. So go and join the Discord, man. You know, here he is. Here's the Discord link in the description box below. I got a super chat here. Let me read it before I hop off. Shout out to Darius Chambers. Where do you meet girls in Toronto? Bro, this is a Japan stream, brother. Okay, interesting.
I'll still answer since he spent the $2. So which we, you know, I greatly appreciate you donating. So the nice thing about Toronto is that there isn't much to do. So women tend to mingle around the same spots. And you can very much filter out the women by class versus like where they physically are. So there's like a running joke that if you were looking for older women, so to speak, you would go to Square One Mall, which is just outside of the city. Square One is like a good place to go. And then in the city, there's a ton of bars downtown and clubs you could go to. Warehouse on Queen Street is like a running joke. You want to meet women in their early 20s, you can go there. There's a bar granted, don't go if you look too old, but there's a bar at Ryerson University. You can go there and meet women as well. And then I would say just on Queen Street, summertime, you know, go from Yonge and Dundas, walk down Queen Street. And yeah, there's a ton of restaurants there where young women tend to kind of mingle in the summertime. Those are good places to go. Otherwise, there's going to be too spread out. So stay in those kind of core areas.
Wow. Amazing. Why is there two different Discord links? What's going on there? 6K. Which one works? All right. So, brother, either this one here on the Nightbot, that Discord link works, or that's weird. Why is there two different links? Huh. Okay, I need to look into that real quick. That's a bit strange. Okay, so either this one works or the one I posted works, but you make that test, brothers. Okay, so thank you very much, Kyron. Thank you, brothers. Again, IT, crypto, stocks, Python course. Make sure you join the Patreon. Please join the Patreon. I'll be dropping financial intel on there on the Patreon. And of course, man, this year will be the best years of our lives so far. Let's push towards that. Okay. Thank you, brothers, and peace out. I'll see you, brothers.